व्हेरी वॉर्म वेलकम टू यू. आजचा कार्यक्रम जरी पुण्यात असला तरी थोडंसं मराठी आणि इंग्लिश अशा दोन्ही भाषांमध्ये मी तुमच्याशी संवाद साधणार आहे. कारण आपले प्रमुख पाहुणेच नॉन मराठी महाराष्ट्रीयन नसल्यामुळे आय थिंक हा थोडासा इंग्रजीमध्ये पण कार्यक्रम करण्याची एक जबाबदारी आहे. सर्वप्रथम कुठलाही कार्यक्रम सुरू करण्याच्या आधी एक शुभ गोष्टीने आपण सुरुवात करतो. तर त्यासाठी आपल्याबरोबर आज केशव शंखनाद पथक, पुण्यामधलं एक प्रख्यात पथक आहे, त्यांच्या शंखनादामधनं आपण ह्या कार्यक्रमाची सुरुवात करणार आहोत. तर मी केशव शंखनाद पथकांच्या सगळ्या कार्यकर्त्यांना विनंती करते की त्यांनी ह्या कार्यक्रमाची एक जोरदार आम्हाला सुरुवात करून द्यावी. धन्यवाद. पुणेकरांच्या समोर काहीतरी छान प्रस्तुत झालं की टाळ्या उत्स्फूर्तपणे येतात, त्यामुळे माझं काम थोडंसं सोपं आहे. ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द 3 होस्ट ऑर्गनायझेशन्स, प्रभा खैतान फाउंडेशन, प्रबोधन मंच येरवडा भाग and Pune Samvad, it is our pleasure and privilege to invite our guests for today's events, dignitaries in the audience and all you Punekars who are interested and who have who have taken out the time to be here with us. Today's event has been graciously organized with the efforts of these 3 organizations. I would like to make a very brief introduction to these 3 organizations. The Prabha Khaitan Foundation, it is a Kolkata-based non-profit trust established by late Dr. Prabha Khaitan in 1980s. Dr. Khaitan was an eminent literator, cultural and social activist who valued the heritage of Indian literature, art and culture. The foundation has charted a resplendent journey of more than 4 long decades in curating initiatives that encourage literature, art forms, socio-cultural development and also humanitarian causes. EHSAS is the women empowerment wing of the foundation, representing a conglomeration of successful intellectual women across all spheres of society. I think today we have the few representative luminaries from this foundation present with us today. Some of the events that have become landmarks in India and abroad, which were initiated by the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, include Kitab for book launches, an author's afternoon, and the Right Circle. The second organization, I will just introduce and then invite the guests. The second organization is the Prabodhan Manch of Yeravda Bhag. Prabodhan Manch is an association of persons formed by like-minded professionals who have come together to facilitate discussions and knowledge exchange on various topics in an effort to put before people a balanced view on that subject. In 2016, late Shri Manohar Parrikar had graced the event of Prabodhan Manch, and since then, eminent speakers like Shri J. Sai Deepak, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, Shri Vijay Gokhale, Sunanda Vashisht have delivered lectures to overflowing audiences. The third organization, which is Pune Samvad, I will introduce to you a little later because this is going to be their launching event. With this, now it is with a great privilege that I welcome our guests for the evening, Advocate Shri J. Sai Deepak ji, Dr. Vikram Sampath, and Ms. Shefali Vaidya. I request I also request Shri Manoj Pochat ji and Shri Thanaram Chaudhary ji to escort the guests and take their seats on the stage. To dispel the darkness of ignorance, we need to usher in an era of knowledge and wisdom. The lighting of the auspicious lamp signifies the beginning of our collective quest for knowledge. Invoking Goddess Saraswati in our minds, I would like to invite all the dignitaries on the dais to light the auspicious lamp. पुणेकर मंडळी, आपण सगळ्यांनी टाळ्यांच्या साथीने ह्या दीप प्रज्वलन सोहळ्यात सहभागी होऊयात. Thank you all dignitaries. May this light lead us all into a brighter future for our country. What is more befitting but a Rudra Stotra Pathan that precedes the book launch that's about Shiva? The Rudra chanting is for invoking the Shiva Tattva that is believed to protect and eliminate enemies and obstacles from the path of a devotee. रुद्र स्तोत्राचे पठण करण्यासाठी आज आपल्यामध्ये वेदमूर्ती श्री वल्लभ कुलकर्णी, श्री मयूर पाठक व त्यांच्याबरोबर काही वेदसेवक उपस्थित आहेत. मी त्यांना विनंती करते की त्यांनी मंचावरून रुद्र स्तोत्र पठण करावे. हे स्तोत्र यजुर्वेद व ऋग्वेदातले आहेत, तर ते हे सगळे वेदसेवक जे आहेत ते आपल्यासमोर त्याचं पठण करून ह्या कार्यक्रमाची अजूनही शोभा वाढवणार आहेत.
हरिः ओम त्र्यंबकं जजामहे सुगन्धिं पुष्टिवर्धनं उर्वारुकमिव बन्धनान् मृत्योर्मुक्षीयमामृतात्. नमस्ते रुद्रमन्यव उतोत इखवे नमः. बाहुभ्यामुत ते नमः. जाते रुद्र शिवा तनूरघोरा पापकाशिनी तया नस्तन्वाशन्तमया गिरिशन्ताभिषाकशीः. जामिकुं गिरिशन्तहस्ते बिभर्गस्तवे शिवाङ्गिरित्रतां कुरु माहिगुंसीः. पुरुखं जगत शिवेन वचसा त्वा गिरिशाच्छा वदामसि. यथा नः सर्वमिद यक्ष्मं समना असत. अद्य वोचदधिवक्ता प्रथमो दैव्योऽभिखक. अहिंच सर्वाञ्जं भयं सर्वांश्च जातु धान्यो धराचिः परासुव. असोजस्ताम्रो अरुण उत बभ्रुः सुमङ्गलः जे चेनग्ं रुद्रा अभितो दिक्षु श्रिताः सहस्रशो वैखाग्ं हेड ईमहे असोजो वसर्पति नीलग्रीवो विलोहितः नङ्गोपा अदृशन्नुदहार्जः सदृष्टो मृडयाति नः नमोऽस्तु नीलग्रीवाय सहस्राक्षाय मीढुखे अचोजे अस्य सत्वानो हन्तेभ्यो करं नमः प्रमुञ्च धन्वनस्तयोमुभयोरारत्न्योर्जाम् जाश्यते हस्त इखवा पराता भगवो वप विचन्दनुः कपर्दिनो विशल्यो बाणवां उत अनेसन्नस्य जा इखव आभुरस्य निखङ्गदीः जामिखं द्विर्मे दुष्टमहसे बभूवते धनुः तयास्मान् विश्वतक्ष्मयक्ष्मया परिभुज परीते धन्वनो हेतिरस्मान् वृणक्तु विश्वतः अथोज इखुदिस्तवारे अस्मिन्निदेहितम् अवतत्यधनुष्टं सहस्राक्षा सदेखुदे निशीर्ज शल्यानामुखा शिवो नः सुमना भव नमस्त आयुधाय नातताय कृष्णवे उभाभ्यामुतते नमो बाहुभ्यां तव ते नमः जाते शिवा तनुः शूरा पापकाशिनी तया न सन्वाशन्तमया गिरिशन्ताभिचाकशीः गिरिशन्तस्ते विभख्यस्तवे शिवाङ्गिरित्रतां कुरु माहिंसीः पुरुकं जगत मानो महन्तमुत मानो अर्भकं मान उक्षन्तमुत मान उक्षितं मानो वधीः पितरं मोत मातरम् मानः प्रियास्तन्वो रुद्ररीरिकः मानस्तोकेतनये मान आयुकिमानो गोकुमानो अश्वेखुरिरिकः मानो वीरान् रुद्रभामिनो बधीरे हविक्मन्तः सदमित्वा हवामहे हरिः ओम्
हरिः ओम् ओम गाथपदिं मेधपदिं मेधपदिं गाथपदिं गाथपदिं मेधपदिं रुद्रं रुद्रं मेधपदिं गाथपदिं गाथपदिं मेधपदिं रुद्रं गाथपदिमिति गाथपदिं मेधपदिं रुद्रं रुद्रं मेधपदिं मेधपदिं रुद्रञ्जलाशभेषजं रुद्रं मेधपदिं मेधपदिं रुद्रञ्जलाशभेषजं मेधपदिमिति मेधपदिं रुद्रञ्जलाशभेषजं रुद्रं रुद्रञ्जलाशभेषजं जलाशभेषजमिति जलाशभेषजं तच्छंयोस्तत्तच्छंयोः सुम्नौ सुम्नौ शंयोस्तत्तच्छंयोः सुम्नां शंयोः सुम्नौ सुम्नौ शंयोः सुम्नमीमह ईमहे सुम्नौ शंयोः सुम्नमीमहे शंयोरिति शंयोः सुम्नमीमह ईमहे सुम्नौ सुम्नमीमहे ईमह इतीमहे यः शुक्र इव यो यः शुक्र इव सूर्यः शुक्र इव यो यः शुक्र इव सूर्याः शुक्र इव सूर्यः शुक्र इव सूर्यो हिरण्यमिव सूर्यः शुक्र इव सूर्यो हिरण्यमिव शुक्र इवेति शुक्रः इव सूर्यो हिरण्यमिव हिरण्यमिव सूर्यः सूर्यो हिरण्यमिव रोचते रोचते हिरण्यमिव सूर्यः सूर्यो हिरण्यमिव रोचते हिरण्यमिव रोचते रोचते हिरण्यमिव हिरण्यमिव रोचते हिरण्यमिवेति हिरण्यम् इव रोचत इति रोचते श्रेष्ठो देवानां देवानां श्रेष्ठ श्रेष्ठो देवानां वसुर्वसुर्देवानां श्रेष्ठ श्रेष्ठो देवानां वसोः देवानां वसुर्वसुर्देवानां देवानां वसोः वसुरिति वसोः ॐ नमस्ते अस्तु भगवन् विश्वेश्वराय महादेवाय त्र्यम्बकाय त्रिपुरान्तकाय त्रिकालाग्निकालाय कालाग्निरुद्राय नीलकण्ठाय मृत्युञ्जयाय सर्वेश्वराय सदाशिवाय श्रीमन्महादेवाय नमः नमः पार्वतीपते हर हर महादेव श्रीकृष्णार्पणमस्तु.
धन्यवाद. एक प्रकारे खूपच छान वातावरण निर्मिती ह्या स्तोत्र पठणाने झाली आहे. नाउ वी मूव ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट ऑफ आवर इव्हेंट. On behalf of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, Prabodhan Manch and Pune Samvad, we are honored to felicitate the dignitaries on the dais. May I call upon Shri Thanaram Chaudhary ji to felicitate Dr. Vikram Sampath, our celebrity author, who has added now one more book on Indian history to his already growing mountain of books. So I request the volunteers to please bring the felicitation tray. And I request Chaudhary ji to felicitate Dr. Vikram Sampath. डॉक्टर संपत, आपले पुण्यनगरीमध्ये खूप खूप स्वागत. मे आय नाव कॉल अपॉन श्री मनोज पोचक जी टू फेलिसिटेट ॲडव्होकेट श्री जे साई दीपक. इट इज आवर ऑनर टू हॅव श्री साई दीपक हियर इन पुणे. ही इज एन ॲडव्होकेट इन द सुप्रीम कोर्ट and is the chief guest for today's function. साई दीपक जी, आपलं पुण्यनगरीत हार्दिक स्वागत. मे आय नाव call upon Mrs. Swati Navgire on the stage to do the honor of felicitating our very own Miss Shefali Vaidya, a fiery journalist and author who has charmed us all with her photos wearing beautiful handloom sarees from regions across India. मी ह्या सभागृहात जमलेल्या सर्व प्रेक्षकांना सांगू इच्छिते की आपल्या सर्व पाहुण्यांना आज आपण पुणेरी पगडी प्रदान करतो आहोत. तसेच पुणे संवाद ह्या संस्थेचे मानचिन्ह आणि शाल व श्रीफळ याने आपण सर्व मान्यवरांचे आज स्वागत व सत्कार केलेला आहे. As you know, there are few people in the organizing team whose contribution is invaluable. So I now call upon Shri Kedar Naik from Pune Samvad team to felicitate Shri Thanaram Chaudhary ji. Shri Thanaram Chaudhary ji, ladies and gentlemen, is a businessman and a person who is keenly involved in social activities. He owns the chain of medical shops Dawa Point, and he is the mentor and chairperson of Prabodhan Mancha, Yeravda Bhag. Thank you, Thanaram Chaudhary ji, for all your efforts in making this event possible. I also request Shri Kedar Naik ji to felicitate Shri Manoj Pochat, again an invaluable member of the Pune Samvad team. He is an IT and software professional. He has served as a senior executive with companies like IBM and Tata. He is a co-founder and COO of Seva Infotech and Sakar Robotics. And amongst the many things that he works with, he is also an advisory at the Pinnacle Atal Incubation Board in Pune. Thank you, Manoj ji, for your invaluable guidance to make this event possible. Thank you, all dignitaries. You can take your seats. Before we move to the main part of the event, we are very glad that in presence of such luminary guests and in front of such an august audience, we are able to launch our platform called Pune Samvad. This is the first event of Pune Samvad, and I think there couldn't have been a better beginning than this. Pune Samvad is conceived as a vibrant platform where curious minds will converge, where intellectuals, students, industry leaders, scholars, and cultural enthusiasts will find themselves exchanging ideas and thoughts. This platform is conceived to be rooted in a shared passion for exploring Indian culture, Indian history, and Indian civilization. Pune Samvad will organize and engage citizens in meaningful dialogues that are meant to inspire, provoke thought, and shape our understanding of Bharat. With today's launch, we invite you Punekars to join us in enriching conversations and journey with us in our collective pursuit for knowledge. I request the dignitaries on the dais to unveil the logo of Pune Samvad. So ladies and gentlemen, I request you to please put your hands together to encourage a very young team of enthusiastic individuals who are shaping Pune Samvad. Please bring the logos on stage. So all interested people in the audience can register and become a part of this platform, and you will get regular updates on the events that this platform is already planning in the coming year. स्वागत व सत्कार कार्यक्रमानंतर आपण आता पुढील कार्यक्रमाकडे वळूयात. पुढील कार्यक्रमाचे प्रास्ताविक करण्यासाठी मी श्री मनोज पोचट यांना मंचावर आमंत्रित करते.
Namaskar, respected dignitaries on the dais, Shri Thanaram ji, Shri Vikram ji, Advocate J. Sai Deepak ji, and Shefali Tai. We all are gathered here in large numbers to know, basically we are in the search of truth to know and to understand about Gyan Vapi Mandir. And I'm saying it Gyan Vapi Mandir. What was the history behind it, how it started, and to do that, it won't be justified if we start before chanting Devadidev Mahadev. So with me, all of you, I request to chant Om Namah Parvate Pat Har Har Mahadev. I didn't hear the sound, so I request once again, दोनों मुट्ठियां भींचिए और जोर से हर हर महादेव. We as an organizer are very happy to have this August gathering in this auditorium and to do this book launch. As already talked about the three organizers who are here, Pune Samvad, Prabodhan Manch Erwada Bhag, and Prabha Khaitan Foundation. I welcome you as a part of our organizing team to be here. This cause unites us. We all know what has happened. We also have anger in our heart, but at the same time, we are happy that history is getting corrected and things are happening. When I got to know through Pushkarji and Vikramji and they wanted to do this book launch in Pune, I said we must do it in Pune, and we thought of doing it in the east part of Pune, where this kind of program also should happen more frequently. So this book, Waiting for Shiva, as some of us heard in one of the media conclave in Delhi, someone said the peer group and Koi Vikram Sampath is writing a book called Waiting for Shiva. So I want to tell those people, and this has been happening since last 70 years. It is very easy. Someone in Delhi discredit someone's work and not understanding, and we see that, right? Be it Padma Awards, be it anything. So someone rightly said in the conclave that Koi, it's not Koi, it's a the Vikram Sampath. And Vikramji, I'm very happy that I'm staying that in Oxford or based in Pune, and people gave him a baffling reply about his Koi remarks, and I did not say much about it because Shefali ji is here and she is going to talk, about this. So we are very happy here in the August gathering of Dr. Vikramji, J. Sai Deepak, and it won't be good on my part to speak much because I want the dais, the dignitaries to talk about it. But before that, we also see that how as a society we waited. समाज की परीक्षा कितनी हुई, कितने सालों तक हुई, हजारों सालों की गुलामी में जो हमारा समाज था, उसका अंत अपन मराठीमध्ये नको अंत पाहू आता अनंता, तर त्याचा शेवटी अंत, it has to end and it has to get corrected. Things are happening, things are progressing, but it is at the right time, at the same time, people are talking about it. Someone is researching about it, and we must credit those people who are doing this. We must motivate them. And this people, we are gathered here in large number. We should read that work. We should propagate that work. We should talk about it. So as many as people can read about it, talk about it. And how this possible? As rightly said, Shiva Bhutva Shivam Yajit. अगर शिव को मानना है, शिव को समझना है, तो शिव बनके ही शिव की पूजा करनी पड़ेगी. तो भगवान देवादिदेव महादेव ने विष प्राशन करके सृष्टि की रक्षा की थी. वही हमें विष तो प्राशन नहीं करना है, बट समाज के लिए, देश के लिए वैसे ही भाव से काम करना है. और जो हम कर सकते हैं, हम ऐसे विचारों को प्रोपोगेट कर सकते हैं, हम ऐसे विचारों से जुड़ सकते हैं. और ये सब करते हुए आज हम देखते हैं कि जो राम जन्मभूमि प्राण प्रतिष्ठा जैसा कार्यक्रम हुआ, उस समय जब प्रभु श्री राम अयोध्या में आए, तो दिवाली हम मनाते हैं उसी दिन को, जो उस समय हमारे पूर्वजों को भी संभव नहीं हुआ. इस बार पूरे विश्व में दीपावली मनी. तो ऐसे सब विषय जब होते हैं तो हमारा यह दायित्व बनता है हम उनसे जुड़े। मैं आगे ज़्यादा समय न लेते हुए इस कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए आप सबसे अनुरोध करता हूं और आप सबका इस कार्यक्रम में स्वागत करता हूं। हम ऑर्गेनाइजिंग टीम की वजह से ये कार्यक्रम यहाँ पर पुणे में कर पाए और मैं अपने वाणी को विराम देता हूं। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Manoj ji. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we arrive at that part of the event which all of us are eagerly awaiting. For this launch, we also have some dignitaries of the dais, so I would like to invite them. At the same time, I'm also going to once again invite the Keshav Shankhanad Pathak to take their places on the stage. The dignitaries of the dais, पुण्याचे माजी खासदार श्री प्रदीपजी रावत ह्यांनी मंचावर यावं. तसेच श्री अजय मेहता ऑफ दीपक फर्टिलायझर्स यांनी मंचावर यावं. व्हॉलंटियर्स, इफ यू कॅन प्लीज एस्कॉर्ट दीज डिग्निटरीज टू कम टू द डायस. Also Shri Mahesh Lahoti of Sajag Securities, please come on the dais, sir. Yeah. Shri Kumar Gera of Gera Developers, I request you and invite you to please grace the dais, sir. Yeah. We also have Mr. Mukesh Malhotra, Wakefield Industries, to please join us on the dais and grace the occasion. Do we have Shri Nitin Nyati ji of Nyati Constructions? I request him to please come on the dais. And so please welcome Malhotra ji. I also request Mr. Pramod Chaudhary of Praj Industries, if he is in the audience, to please come on the dais. And Dr. Abhay Firodia of Force Motors, if he is somewhere in the audience. Okay. Thank you, sir. Please, you can. I request the volunteers to please bring out the books for the launch, book launch. Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi. अतिशय शुभ समजल्या जाणाऱ्या शंखनादाने आपण ह्या पुस्तकाचे अनावरण करणार आहोत. केशव शंखनाद पथकाचे सर्व कार्यकर्ते इथे उपस्थित आहेत आणि जसं पुस्तकांचं अनावरण होईल तसा त्यांनी शंखनाद करायचा आहे. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for this momentous occasion. धन्यवाद. Dhanyavad. I request all the dignitaries to take their seats once again, and I will read a very short blurb about the book. I'm sure you have all read it already, and copies are of course available just outside this auditorium. Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi. Few places in the world carry the heavy burden of history as effortlessly as Kashi or Varanasi does. The holy city embodies the very soul of our civilization and personifies the resilience that we have displayed over centuries in the face of numerous adversities and fatal attacks. Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi, recreates the history, antiquity, and sanctity of Kashi as the abode of Bhagwan Shiva in the form of Vishveshwara or Vishwanath. Shiva himself assured his devotees of salvation if they leave their mortal coils in the city. The book delves into the history of this self-manifested Swayambhu Jyotirling shrine of Vishveshwar, which for centuries has been both a refuge for the devout and a target of the bloodiest waves of iconoclasm. However, each time an attempt was made to obliterate the temple by demolishing it, it has managed to rise and prosper. The book Waiting for Shiva documents these cataclysmic events in the temple's history. The final death blow was dealt in 1669 by the Mughal despot Aurangzeb, who demolished the temple and erected few domes on the partially destroyed western wall to call it a mosque. The area that is now called Gyan Vapi Mosque and the surrounding land that lies adjacent to the new temple of Vishwanath, which came up towards the end of the 18th century, have always been one of intense contestation. Bloody riots have overrun Varanasi over this issue multiple times in the past. During the colonial era, the doors of the British courts were knocked at to settle the occupancy issue, and they adjudicated the matter several times. Post-independence too, the desire to liberate the complex has been seething in Hindu imagination. A new suit filed in 2021 before the Varanasi Civil Court reopened a long festering historical wound. Despite several appeals right up to the Supreme Court to dismiss the plaint, a survey by the Archaeological Survey of India was ordered, which laid bare the truth in its findings in January of 2024. Dr. Vikram Sampath's latest offering retraces the long history of this bitterly disputed site and the dramatic twists and turns in the checkered past of this hoary shrine. The long suppressed secrets that lay hidden in Gyan Vapi finally are going to find a voice through this book. So ladies and gentlemen, I once again call upon you to put your hands together to congratulate Dr. Vikram Sampath for bringing forth this knowledge through his painstaking research and his easy to read, fluid writing style. We wish you all the very best for the success of this book. We now move to the last part of our event, and I'm sure you are all very eager to hear what our guests have to talk about. With the launch of this much awaited book, we now have on the stage a luminary in their respective field, and they are going to bring diverse range of thoughts and opinions in the panel discussion that will now ensue. Before we begin, however, let me once again take this opportunity to introduce these three guests, although I know that none of them needs a very formal introduction. Okay. Yes, one good news is that the book is already getting translated into Marathi. And we are going to, since we have a stage laden with these luminary personalities, we are going to have the cover page of this Marathi translated book unveiled in front of this audience. डॉक्टर संपत यांच्या वीर सावरकरांच्या पुस्तकांनंतर मराठीमध्ये हे पुस्तक येणं हे मला असं वाटतं महाराष्ट्राच्या वाचकाला ही खूपच एक गोड बातमी आहे आणि आम्ही सगळेजण ह्या मराठी आवृत्तीची वाट पाहू आणि स्वागत करू. प्रतीक्षा शिवाची असं ह्या पुस्तकाचं शीर्षक असणार आहे. थँक्यू वन्स अगेन And let me start by introducing Dr. Vikram Sampath to all of you. As I mentioned to him earlier, that since these three luminaries are so much in our homes and our everyday lives through social media that it feels like we know them very well. But I would still take this opportunity to make a formal introduction. Dr. Vikram Sampath is an engineer turned Indian historian. He's based out of Bangalore. There is now a long list of his published books, beginning with his first one, Splendors of Royal Mysore, The Untold Story of the Vodeyars, to the two splendidly researched biographical volumes on Veer Savarkar, which Maharashtrians have loved and enjoyed, and now this one, Waiting for Shiva, adding another feather in his cap. In 2021, Dr. Vikram Sampath was elected a Fellow of the prestigious Royal Historical Society. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi's first Yuva Puraskar in English literature and the ARSC International Award for Excellence in Historical Research in New York. While history books tend to be only read by intellectuals and researchers, Dr. Sampath's books have become bestsellers in India, reaching homes and readers across all age groups. Dr. Sampath was one of the 4 writers and artists selected as writers in residence at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in 2015. Dr. Sampath has a doctorate in history and music from University in Queensland, Australia, and was a senior research fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi in the period between 2017 and 2019. He was also a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network and Eisenhower Global Fellow. Currently, he is an adjunct senior fellow at Monash University in Australia and the founder of the Archive of Indian Music and the Foundation of Indian Historical and Cultural Research that fosters new scholarship in Indian history. He curates Earth, a cultural fest in India, and amongst all this, he finds time to write well-researched books. So ladies and gentlemen, this is not a koi Dr. Sampath, but the Dr. Sampath amongst us today, as rightly mentioned by Manoj ji. I now take pleasure in introducing our chief guest, Advocate Shri J. Sai Deepak. You have a fan following here, sir. Advocate Sai Deepak ji is a litigator practicing as an arguing counsel before the Supreme Court of India and High Court of Delhi. Alumnus of prestigious universities in India like Anna University and IIT Kharagpur's Law School, Sai Deepak ji has carved a niche for himself as a litigator in civil, commercial and constitutional matters. He has been part of several landmark cases of significance before the Supreme Court and the High Court. In 2019, Sai Deepak ji was presented the Young Alumni Achievers Award by his alma mater, IIT Kharagpur. He is the author of best-selling books like India That Is Bharat and India, Bharat and Pakistan, The Constitutional Journey of a Sandwiched Civilization. On social media, Sai Deepak ji's video clips provide great clarity on political issues and debates, a logical voice that reaches all of us amid the cacophony of false narratives. Welcome, Advocate Deepak ji, to Pune. And last but not least, it is my honor to introduce my illustrious friend, Ms. Shefali Vaidya, who has propelled to fame with her fiery social media posts and her courage to express opinion with a conviction amid fierce opposition and sometimes also abuse. Shefali is an award-winning multilingual author and media professional with keen interest in India's history, textiles, art and crafts, and Indian temples. She hails from Goa and is active in Goa's and India's political debates and discussions. Being a postgraduate in communication studies and with a diploma in Indology, Ms. Vaidya has been a torchbearer on social media for celebrating Indianness, India's history and culture, showcasing India's timeless beauty through its temple architecture. Women like me admire her and also a little bit jealous for the saris that she effortlessly drapes introducing us all to the fantastic weaves and textiles that India makes in its most remote regions. Shefali's activities range from curating literary and cultural fests to writing regular journalistic columns to an avid collector of heritage weaves, constantly promoting traditional weavers, craftsmen and women, and organizations involved in Vedic pursuits. She is a fellow of Ananta Leadership Academy and is a recipient of the prestigious Infosys Fellowship instituted at the Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute in Pune. आणि पुणेकर मंडळी, शेफाली वैद्य एक पुणेकर आहे आणि पुण्याचा जाज्वल्य अभिमान तिच्या सर्व कार्यातून दिसून येतोच. सो टाळ्यांच्या गडगडाटात आपण आपल्या तिन्ही पाहुण्यांचे स्वागत करूयात. And with this, now I hand over the reins of the program to Shefali Vaidya and invite her to begin the panel discussion. Pochatji and Chaudharyji, you can take the seats in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anaga, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, can you hear me?
Check.
Okay.
Is this working?
Am I audible? Okay.
Is this working? Yes. Okay.
इंट्रोडक्शन फक्त मराठीत देते. मला आज अत्यंत आनंद होतोय कि कोई विक्रम संपत, कोई साई दीपक का इंटरव्यू कोई शेफाली वैद्य ले रही है, and there is a hall full of people who have gathered to listen. That is proof that the transition from koi to the has already happened, regardless of what other people are saying. But before we start, आत्ता मी ऐकत होते बऱ्याच लोकांनी तुम्हाला हर हर महादेव म्हणायला सांगितलं, पण जसं हवं तसं त्या जोशामध्ये हर हर महादेव म्हटलं गेलं नाही. आणि आपण पुण्यात आहोत जिथे शिवाजी महाराजांनी त्यांच्या मावळा सैन्याबरोबर पहिल्यांदा हर हर महादेवची गर्जना केली होती. सो आय वॉन्ट दॅट गर्जना, आय वॉन्ट दॅट जोश. सो से पार्वती पते हरा हरा महादेव. जेवला नाहीत का? परत पार्वती पते हरा हरा महादेव. Vikram, it's a great pleasure, and I think I have the distinction of hosting a Q&A with you for each one of your books.
You come here. You're the man of the moment.
And this was a book that came rather as a surprise, because I was also expecting, after Bravehearts of Bharat, you had announced that your next book was going to be on Tipu Sultan. So tell me, which micro pressure groups basically compelled you to write this book, and how do you feel, one more book in such quick succession?
Actually, macro pressure group from there. A very good evening, everyone. It's truly always a great pleasure to be in Pune. I always say, I think I have a resident citizenship here, and I get so much love and affection here, much more than my own hometown, Bangalore. So it's always a great honor to be here. Thank you. And this evening is extra special, being flanked by two people whom I deeply admire and adore. Sai Deepak, who's a younger brother, a very dear friend, and of course, who commands a fan following across the country like very few people. I mean, even politicians might envy this kind of fan following that he commands. And I must say that, you know, it was a very last-minute request that I made to him, and with due credit and immense gratitude to him that he adjusted a lot of his heavy schedule in the courts. He took his hearings, all of them in the hotel today, and still managed to be with us. That really means a lot.
Anything for you.
And Shefali is always one of the best conversationalists because she reads the book end to end.
Correct.
And then the questions become so much more enriching to everybody. Otherwise, the usual questions that people ask, it really makes very little sense. And deep gratitude to all the organizing group, Prabodhan Manch, Pune Samvad, and the Prabha Khaitan Foundation, which has been organizing launches of this book across multiple cities. My immense gratitude to all of them, and all you Punekars who've come here on a Friday evening. I forgot it's a working day and a working evening to come in this large numbers. The heart is filled with a lot of gratitude today, Shefali. You said, how are you feeling today? I must share here that exactly 16 years ago, in 2008, and in the month of March, that was when I began my literary career with my first book, Splendors of Royal Mysore, the untold story of the Vodeyars that came out at that time. A lot of people might think, something happened only in the last 10 years after a certain climate and so on that was cultivated in the country. But I think my journey began much earlier. A very confused mid-20 something who was slogging his way in the corporate sector, not knowing why he's doing what he's doing. And I thought that is my first book, and with that I'll get back to my very boring corporate job, all the time cursing myself whether, I'm going to die one day, profit and loss statements of some American company which will not add any value to my life or anyone else's life. But thankfully, I think destiny had better plans, and this is my 9th book, which is there
It's
today.
amazing.
And this, as you mentioned, Shefali, Tipu Sultan was occupying center space in my head. A very, very troublesome story to write. All the destruction, all the barbarity. It takes a lot of toll even on the person who's writing all of that. But then Mahadev decided to intrude, and how? It was just in a literary festival that I met another dharmic warrior in the legal field, Advocate Vishnu Shankar Jain ji. God bless him and his father, Sri Hari Shankar Jain ji, who I think on behalf of all of us, we owe a civilizational gratitude and debt to this father-son duo. In that festival, very casually we were chatting, and then he said he's passionate about the topic, as all lawyers are, and he showed me a lot of these documents, including James Princeps maps of that Ashtamandap, the Bhavya Ashtamandap temple that of Vishweshwar, which was constructed in 1580. And there was also a little bit of pathos in his eyes that while about Ayodhya people know. Sorry.
I think it's actually hitting it. Yeah, you can keep it forward. Yeah.
Forward.
हाथ में लेते
हाथ में, ठीक है. So while people know a lot about the Ayodhya thanks to the movement, I think Gyan Vapi, though it keeps coming day in and day out in the newspapers and in channels, a lot of us do not know what the history of this conflict itself is and what is it that we are fighting for. So I thought it was a historian's burden or responsibility to put this all together in public space. And Vishnuji and I discussed, I'll probably write a few articles about it, is what initially was thought. But then once I entered the alley of this Vishwanath Mandir's history, it was so captivating that I realized that articles will not do justice to this. There needed to be a full-length book about this subject. And in a whim I decided, and this is probably the only project which I finished in 6 months. It has never happened like this before, because each book takes a couple of years of research, and Sai knows it considering the tomes that he writes, about the amount of research that goes in, because you need to be so careful about what you put in there. But I think they say, when your intention is good, the universe somehow conspires. And in this case, when you're writing about Mahadev, you don't need a higher power than that to intervene. Magically, people started appearing from so many places, and I really cannot explain this, and I'm being very honest here. I had the very good fortune of making acquaintance with the Jagadguru Shankaracharya, Sri Abhinava Shankara Bharati ji, the 72nd Peethadipati of the Kudali Sringeri Mahasamsthanam, who got to know I'm writing about this, and he got in touch with me. He said, I'd like to speak to you about this, sat over several sessions, explained to me some of the esoteric concepts about what a Shivalinga actually means. He said, it's very important, you're writing about Shiva. You also need to explain, is it just phallus worship, organ worship and so on as it is derided? Or what do the Agama Shastras say? What do the Puranas say and so on? And he also introduced me to some Sanskrit Pandits in Bangalore. Now, I was very sure that I don't want to refer to the primary sources in translation, especially done by Westerners, with their own biases and incompleteness. But for us to know Sanskrit, it will take a a lifetime to master that. So Dr. H.R. Meera and Professor Kannan in Bangalore, who sat with me over several weeks and helped me translate the Shiva Puran, the Linga Puran, the Padma Puran, the Skanda Puran, the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, the Vayu Puran, and also several Nibandhas in Sanskrit. Kritya Kalpataru by Lakshmi Dhara in the 11th century, Vachaspati Mishra's Tirtha Prakasha, Tirtha Chintamani in the 15th century, Tirtha Prakasha by Mitra Mishra in the 16th century, and Tristhali Setu by Narayan Bhatt in the 16th century. All this had valuable information about Kashi, about Vishwanath Mandir in particular, and the Sthala Mahatmyam. Our history is recorded in these Sthala Mahatmyams, which is in Sanskrit, and our ignorance of that language, I think, limits our access to that history too. So it was all of this, in addition, the Persian accounts by people like Al-Baruni, Ibn Battuta, Hassan Nizami, Firishta, Minhaj-e-Siraj, and Aurangzeb's Masare Alamgiri by Saki Mustaid Khan. These and also archival records of the British era, colonial records, court records, which are in voluminous amount of the conflict, and post-independence, legal papers, which Vishnuji very generously dumped some 2,000 pages on me. And when you are reading legal paper, sorry about that. I think anyone who's writing in English too will wonder whether you really know English, because it's so much of legalese which can easily go over your head. So it was really, I think I was seized by some strange energy in those 5-6 months, staying awake till 4-5 in the morning, and constantly writing this book. And now when I look back, honestly speaking, I sometimes wonder, did I write this? I think it was just a good instrument which made itself available to a higher macro pressure, which got this book written.
That brings me to your dedication, and I think that is probably why you dedicated this book, not to any person, but I read it out, to the Lord and Protector of the universe, Sri Vishwanath, the ruler of Kashi, the Mahasmashana, Anandavana, Rudravasa, and the never abandoned Avimukta Kshetra. As you said, it was a macro pressure group that made you write this book.
Yeah.
Sai, I'll come to you. Sadhguru, in the prologue to his book, has said that when it comes to Kashi, the when is not as important as what and why. So my question to you is, what is it about Kashi that makes it so important to Bharat, civilizationally, and why does it matter to each one of us? I mean, we are not in Kashi, we are in Maharashtra. So why does it matter to each one person in this hall who are here today to listen about Kashi?
See, as a Shaivite, all I can say is that for me it is among the holiest. Over the last few weeks, I think I've had the opportunity to discuss in detail what is the meaning of holy in the context of the Hindu civilization under Sampradaya, so to speak. So,
can you hear?
Yes, okay. So I certainly believe that you can't think of the history of this land without thinking of Kashi, considering that its dynasty and the city features heavily in our epics, both in Ramayana as well as in Mahabharata. You can't speak of Ramayana and Mahabharata without actually referring to Kashi. Two, see, it's like this. If tomorrow we had the same conversation in the context of Kamakhya, or the same conversation in the context of, let's say, the Bhadrakali Mandir in Warangal, or any other temple for that matter, you will realize that each of these are indispensable to our tapestry. So when you focus on a particular kshetra, obviously it assumes a certain significance, and Kashi of all the places certainly does. But one of the reasons why I am usually careful about bestowing a limited, let's say, exclusivity to certain set of shrines is because today it has a consequence in the public domain. People are waiting to limit the scope of your ask. People are waiting to say thus far and no further. So I would certainly start by saying it is certainly among the holiest, without a doubt. But as far as we are concerned, you go and ask certain sadhanas, they'll tell you, well, Chidambaram is as holy. Yeah. So one of the reasons why we established these kshetras in multiple places, apart from, of course, the metaphysics of it, is that if you were to limit the scope of that energy's presence in one particular place, Bharat has always been among the most populated regions of the world, regardless of which period of history you're looking at. When the entire population chooses to go to one place, what does it do to that place? Will it have the ability to bear the resources, or does it have the resources to bear the strain of it? So there is a Kashi, then there is an Uttar Kashi, there is a Dakshin Kashi.
Yeah.
Similarly, we have managed to create multiple, let's say, replicas of it with the same kind of sanctity and the same kind of energy.
Absolutely.
This could be said of it that it's not particularly unique to our civilization, because if there's a York, there's a New York, if there's an Orleans, there's a New Orleans, right? Because ultimately America was seen as Nova Europe, which is a reconstruction of the West in the image of Europe, but in a different continent altogether. So I think that is common to the human spirit, where you have certain nerve centers which are seen as holy, and you try to replicate them as much as possible. So in that sense, Kashi is certainly important. Now on the when and why, I remember when I used to attend the Vivekananda Study Circle in IIT Kharagpur. It was led by Professor Joy Sen, who has written a fantastic book on Aryan invasion theory. You should read that. I asked him, why is it that as part of our history reading, we don't focus on the dates? Why don't we focus on the periods when it comes to, let's say, the pre-colonial history, pre-Mughal history, so to speak? What is it that we are exactly lacking? Is it fair to say that we don't have a sense of historicity, so on and so forth? Now, there are two ways of looking at it. One, obviously, our conception of time is cyclical. It's not linear. So, what makes a difference to us is the moral that the story seeks to present. And even assume for a moment that you come to the conclusion that all of this was a fable or a legend or a myth. Okay? That wouldn't take away from the sanctity of the story itself. One of the things that I think is the strength of the Hindu civilization and Hindu culture, so to speak, is if you take away the historicity of Jesus, Christianity is bound to practically crumble. Because their entire belief system is based on the reality of it. Because they want to believe that such a person existed. I'm not getting into whether he existed or not, because I'm not in a position to comment on it. But the premise of Christian historiography has been the existence of a figure, a historical figure. That's not the case with us. Which is why when you look at the dating of Adi Shankara's life, there are several controversies, whether he was before Buddha, after Buddha, 700 years after Buddha, 2000 years after Buddha. That's very, very unclear. 100% after Buddha, that much is clear, but we are not sure of what is the actual period. Okay, but that hasn't made a difference to people's ability to relate to what he is trying to say. This is as long as you are living in what I would call the pre-modern construct, where this has not made a difference to you. So the same set of, let's say, astronomical alignments which are referred to in our books may have happened in multiple cycles of hundreds of years or 2000s of years. We never know that. Which is why when it comes to the dating of Mahabharata, some set of people have a 3000 year figure, some people have a set of 5000 year figures. We are not sure of it. But why has it become relevant now? Because the Abrahamic template requires you to prove something, because the approach of the Christian philosophy and Christian ontology is imposed and foisted on Hindus. True. That was absolutely clear in the manner in which we were expected to prove, tell me this is the exact place Sri Ram was born in Ayodhya. In the entire proceeding. Tell us that, how do you know this is exactly Sita Ma ki Rasoi? How do you know that this is where he was born? And all sorts of disgusting statements made by the OVC brothers from Bhagyanagar. Okay? So, which is why I think now we are forced to confront the reality of proving our faith on the anvils of historicity. Okay? So, I am not disagreeing with Sadhguru's position from a Hindu perspective, but since we are not living in a Hindu worldview, and we are expected to meet the requirements of modernity, and especially in a court of law which does not subscribe to Hindu philosophy or a Hindu way of looking at it, we have no other option but to look at when, where, how, everything. True. And yet, the very same institution, when tasked with the obligation of identifying on the basis of evidence who destroyed the original Ram Mandir and when did it happen, conveniently chose not to touch that question whatsoever in the entire judgment, which ran into 1045 pages. Everything else is discussed except this. I ask myself this question, if the shoe were in the other foot, would the question have been spared?
That's extremely interesting. But having said that, even if we agree to your premise, and I do as a practicing Hindu, that there are energy centers all over the country, and that is why we have so many temples. Each has its own sanctity, each has its own sthana mahatmya, each has its own story. But with Kashi Vishwanatha temple, it's very different because there are temples scattered all over India which are called Kashi Vishwanatha temple. And it is said that if you visit this temple, if you can't go to Kashi for some reason, you go to Tenkasi, which is Dakshina Kasi, and you do darshan there. You go to Khajuraho, there is a Vishwanatha temple. You go to Uttar Kashi, there is a Vishwanatha temple. Even in Pune, do you know that there are 3 Kashi Vishwanatha temples? They are called Kashi Vishwanatha temples. One is in Dhankaudi, one is in Shivaji Nagar, and one is in Somwarpet. They are not just called Vishweshwar temple or Vishwanatha temple, they are called Kashi Vishwanatha temple for a reason. And you have dealt with this aspect quite in detail in your book. So would you care to elaborate on why is Kashi Vishwanatha such an important thing for Bharat?
In the Skanda Puran, which is the main text, which has a parishishta called the Kashi Khanda, which describes in detail the energy structure of Kashi. And as Sai Deepak said, these are energy spaces, and Kashi has been structured in the form of a yantra. It is not, and where at the vertex of that yantra is Vishwanath or Vishweshwara, but there are several other deities which are located, and like a Sri Chakra, at various vertices you have different deities and energy spaces. For those who say there is no documentation, if you look at the Puranic literature, very, very clearly they say from Vishwanath you go so many coasts to the right, then there is Tarakeshwar, then there is Gangeshwar, then there is Gauri Shankar, there is Annapurna, then there is Madhyameshwar, and Bhagwan Shiv himself in the Skanda Puran in a dialogue with Parvati Devi says that there are billions of lingas in Kashi which are my Swarupa, as in Hindi in Kashi there is a famous saying, Kankad Kankad mein Shankar. Everything is Shankar there, and that is why it's called Rudravasa also, the city. But there are 14 major centers which Bhagwan Shiv himself identifies, and that is like a lingatmak swarup, like a human anatomy, where the head is Omkareshwar, the eyes are Trilochana, the feet is something else. So there are 14 such major centers, and in that it is said the 2 right hands of this lingatmak swarup are Vishweshwara and Avimukteshwara. These are the 2 major energy centers which are very important according to the Puranic literature. And why it is important and why this aspiration to go to Kashi perhaps comes from the fact, again going back to the Skanda Puran, where Shiva himself tells Parvati that it's like a guarantee that he gives to all the people. In the dedication you said Avimukta Kshetra. There is a reason for that word also, 2 reasons. One is he's so besotted by the beauty of the place when they come. It is said that Shiva's mother-in-law, Parvati's mother, she said, yeah, this guy is with all these ganas and all, he has come. Where will my daughter go and stay on a hill in Kailash? What will she do? And she disparages her son-in-law. And then according to the Puranic literature, the couple come there and they see this beautiful place which is also called Anandavana or Ananda Kanana. It is actually Vishnu's abode, and Vishnu then gives it away to Shiva as his abode, as the fable goes. And once they land there, he says, I'm never going to abandon this place. So Avimukta, it will be Avimukta. And the other guarantee he gives is any mortal person who leaves his or her coils here, I will come myself when the soul gets out of the body and chant the Tarak Ram mantra in the ears, so that mukti is attained instantly. Just by dying there, you're assured of moksha. And so the Puranas have some, very macabre advice that if you ever go to Kashi, ask someone to break off your legs so that they don't take you and run away. Because your mind may play silly games with you and you leave when you're getting the biggest lottery ticket in your life. Why would you leave that and go away? Because nirvana, moksha, mukti, these are the main goals of all our Indic faiths, whether it is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, all of them. So for all these reasons, I think aspirationally people were looking at these 7 moksha nagaris, Ujjain, Kashi, Avantika, the Saptapuris. In that, Kashi was important as the abode of Vishweshwar. And in Maharashtra too, in homes, I think there is a proverb which says, Kashi's jave nitya vadave. Because those days, maybe it was very difficult to make that journey all the way to Kashi. So especially the women folk in the homes would say, let's at least keep uttering Kashi's jave, Kashi's jave. One day we will go there so that it will manifest. Your speech manifests and your thoughts manifest. So let's go. So that aspirational, desire too. And also, in this history of Kashi and the Vishwanath temple in particular, which I cover in this book, there are, I think, the first part, there are 2 parallel tracks. One is, of course, the history of all these iconoclasm, destructions, all these terrible things that we hear, which is very difficult to document and to read. But alongside, there is another one which is of hope, which is of resilience, which is of the fact that every part of India contributed all through the centuries to that reconstruction of this sacred spot for this particular reason, that this meant a lot to us. And we'll talk more about those resilience, in the midst of all odds that they faced. But just see, even in the 19th century, you had in distant Kerala, the Travancore Maharaja Swati Tirunal, who probably never left his hometown, Padmanabhapuram, went only up to Alipe or so. He sung a bhajan called Vishweshwara Darshan Kar Chala Man Tum Kashi.
Amrita Venkatesh's performance on that is fantastic. I've seen that.
Yes,
Yeah.
in Sindhu Bhairavi Rag.
Yeah.
So it's so across, and today we are talking of north-south divide, the south is different, the north is culturally different. The Swati Tirunal Maharaja didn't think that, oh, this is some Uttar Pradesh, some language which I don't understand. This aspirational, goal of resurrecting Kashi, going there, whether it was Maharashtra, whether it was Kerala, whether it was the east, all over. And that is what I think makes a nation. To all these people who say we were not even a nation, and the British gave us a sense of nationality. What else is that common sense of emotional attachment to a set of so many spaces, which did, I think, multiple things. One is, of course, the faith, the spirituality, but it also welded us all with that sense of patriotism and nationalism. And as Sai said, no parochialism. I mean, if I felt my place was the most sacred, there were 100 others in other parts which were equally sacred. So I think that is why all through the long history of this important, Tirtha Kshetra, there was the whole of India, the whole of Bharat has contributed to its resurrection and reconstruction.
See, even today in Upanayam Samskars in Goa, Karnataka, Maharashtra also probably, the boy says he is going to Kashi,
Kashi Yatra,
and
even
then the
for
Kashi
wedding,
Yatra.
for
Yeah,
us
and
it's
in
correct.
Tamil Nadu they do it in weddings,
Correct.
but in Maharashtra, Karnataka they do it in the Upanayam Samskaram. In Surat, somebody told me that they wanted me to taste the food of Surat, so they said that there is a saying here that Surat no Jaman or Kashi no Maran. And this saying has been there for hundreds of years, saying that you should eat in Surat, but you should die in Kashi. But that concept of Kashi being sacred, being holy, matters a lot. I want to ask you a different question. See, there is always this narrative being played that, okay, maybe the Islamic invaders may have destroyed a few temples in India, but so what? Even Hindus destroy. I'm saying, I'm being the devil's advocate here. But so what? Hindus destroyed Buddhist temples, they never coexisted or whatever. But if you read your book, you will see that Kashi particularly, at the same time, was a place that was sacred to the Buddhists, it was sacred to the Jains, it was sacred to the Hindus, it was also sacred enough for Guru Nanak, I think, also went there for a pilgrimage, right? So it was sacred for all faiths, and this was happening parallelly. And you have mentioned in your book about the Ghadwela king, Govind Ratna, who had both his wives. They were actually practicing Buddhists and he was a practicing Hindu, and also about Huan Sang's descriptions. So could you talk a little bit about how Kashi was the sacred nucleus for all Bharatiya Panths, not just Dharma, not just Hindu Dharma rather?
This Buddhist thing comes up only very curiously when there is a demand for a Hindu reclamation. Rest of the time the Buddhist claims are in great stupor.
Correct.
So I think a couple of months back, when this case was also gathering momentum, you had Irfan Habib come out to the Quint, I think, and say, at least for the first time, he agreed that वहाँ पे एक मंदिर तो तोड़ा गया था, पर वो शिव जी का मंदिर था या नहीं पता नहीं है. So, I mean, you know, the Masre Alamgiri, 1669 September, says very clearly that as per the Badshah's orders, we have destroyed all the temples in Kashi, including that of Bishnath, Vishwanath ka apabhransh, Bishnath. Now, uske baad, what more you want? You are keeping that segue open so that you can say under that there was some other structure, there was all these falsehoods which come up in to just deny the Hindus their claim. But if you come to the history, as you mentioned, Shefali, right from beginning, so within the Hindu sampradayas, all the different panthas that were there, as I said, it was Vishnu, Bhagwan Vishnu's kshetra, and he gave it away to Shiva. And so even now in the Moksha Vilas Mandir in Vishwanath, the first among the Panchayatan pujas that have to be done there, it is for Lakshmi Narayan, which is done first before you go to Vishwanath. And the Shakta traditions have survived there. Manikarnika Ghat is where Sati's earring is supposed to have fallen, and that's where the Mahasmashana, the 24/7 chitaएं जो जलती रहती हैं वहाँ पे, that also happens there. But alongside the other, even the Nastika Panthas, whether it was Buddhism or Jainism, the Buddha gave his first sermon in Varanasi, just outside at Sarnath, in the deer park, and it was called the Dharma Chakra Pravartana, where 5 people first, moved over to his side, and from there, literally, he went. The message was carried over all through. So obviously, it was a place already of such theological importance that even the Buddha thought you have to come there and give your pravachan to gain a kind of an acceptance all over. The Jain, Tirthankaras, right from Parshvanath was, I think, born there. Some other Suparshva was also born in Varanasi. Mahavira is supposed to have come there. A lot of Jina scholars came and preached there in Kashi. You have some of their accounts too, which also talk about a Vishwanath Mandir and how important it was. And within the Hindu, several other panthas, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, and of course the Vallabhacharya. Vallabhacharya also lived in Kashi. You had the Ramanandi, you had the Kabir Panthis, you had the Veerashaivas, the Lingayats, you had the Gorak Panthi, Tantric Akhadas, Mahanirvani Akhadas, all these who made it a part. So one place which is actually a microcosm of the whole of India. Almost every region, every ruler had some construction done there, had some imprint. So literally a smaller version, a mini India, so to say. As you mentioned, Hyun Sang comes in the 7th century, and in his account, which I quote in the book, he says very clearly that it's a thriving place for Buddhist traditions. There are about 30 stupas and about 300 monks who are there, and these stupas are magnificent. There is a golden statue of the Buddha. All of that is happening. This is in the periphery of the city, but inside there are the non-believers of the Buddha who worship Mahadev, who is the presiding deity. There is a huge temple with a statue which is almost 100 feet tall, and almost you feel like it's a living entity. So 7th century, there was coexistence. You spoke about the Gahadwal kings, Govinda Chandra, who was a Vaishnav by practice, but then he richly patronized Shaiva temples, obviously Avimukteshwar, Vishweshwar, all of that, and 2 of his wives were Buddhist. So obviously there was no marital discord, I'm sure, and there was no case of a divorce happening there. So you could be the husband could be a Vaishnava who then patronizes a Shaiva temple, and his wives are Buddhist. And this is 11th century, just a few decades before Qutbuddin Aibak's sword, which actually the sword of Islam, which broke the back of Buddhism, because the Buddhist tradition was a monastic order. So once you break the monastery, the faith crumbles. Whereas in our case, there were thousands of different panthas, sampradayas. How much will you kill? How much will you destroy? There is always a resurgence which will keep happening. So I think once and for all there has to be, we must put to rest this Buddhist Hindu strife, which I think is done only and only by vested interests with no historical value. There could have been one or two some rare instances of some king, Pushyamitra Shunga and so on, which again is highly disputed. But did it have any theological sanction like it had in the case of Islamic iconoclasm? The answer is a sure no.
My next question is to you, Sai. Both Meenakshi Jain's book and Vikram's book talk about the repeated attacks, repeated desecrations of Kashi and the temples of Kashi, and the indomitable spirit of the people of Kashi who kept rebuilding, who kept claiming the sacred spaces. They never let go. And this is not unique just to Kashi. You see the story repeated all over India, where there have been temples destroyed and people have reclaimed the place almost immediately after the invaders have left, and maybe they didn't have the money to build temples that were as big, but they have at least put their devas and devatas in small makeshift places and continued the worship. In my little village in Goa, which was attacked by the Portuguese for 10 years, and they destroyed the main temple there at least 3 times, which is documented. The people just scattered, they lived in the forest, but when the Portuguese forces left, they came back, they rebuilt the temple. So this rebuilding and reclaiming the sacred spaces happened all over India. My question to you is bigger than Kashi. To what do you attribute this resilience, this tenacity of Hindus to claim, reclaim, come back, and never leave their sacred spaces?
Can I connect this with the previous question to Vikram?
Sure.
See, if you look at how the weaponization of Buddhism against the Vedic religion has been orchestrated significantly, there are 2 things that I think the British period successfully did. Every panth, whether it was Astik or Nastik, was always presented in reference to what they call the Brahminical religion, one way or the other. Okay? So therefore, they would see Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism as egalitarian, casteless deviations and departures or even revolts against Brahminical orthodoxy. That was their way of looking at it. The problem with this entire historiography is one, Buddha is crystal clear in his belief as far as Varna Vyavastha is concerned. He himself says that the next person to lead the Sangha will be a Kshatriya, so much so, because he comes from a Kshatriya Kula.
Yeah.
He chastises women for having intermarried in different castes. He chides them for this.
Yeah.
So where is this casteless notion of Buddhism coming from is something that we have to ask ourselves. Second, as Vikram rightly says, they may reject the Veda as the primary pramana as far as their belief system is concerned, but the rest of the values of Hindu philosophy which are traceable to the Vedic religion significantly are taken over. That is actually true of most movements across the world, wherein you will see communism and, let's say, Protestant movements taking Christian values, rejecting only the establishment of the Catholic Church. That happens in every other society. Now, why is this crucial? That there is no scriptural animosity that is taught as part of the faith systems. But remember one thing, the contestation between different panths, dharmic panths so to speak, was virulent with respect to who believes that who is right. Language actually would defeat every provision of the Indian Penal Code today in the way they refer to themselves. Okay. Abuses are hurled freely. Nobody in the family is spared. Okay? Left, right and center it goes. But the thing is, that is the extent to which the society has been tolerant, where the ideas are so dearly held that they contest very, very vociferously. Now, what has not happened, at least as a result of scriptural sanction, as he rightly says, is destruction of the other place of worship. Now, when someone says, what do you do of those instances if you continue digging and you find a Buddhist place? I would say, और थोड़ा खुदाई कर लो, आपको वहाँ पे फिर एक मंदिर दिख जाएगा. बस एक level बाकी है. You know why? One of the first, let's say, temple destructions, which was ordered in the history of Bharat, way before the Islamic invader came, was by certain radical Buddhist missionaries. Okay, that is a fact. So when someone says, you will find something there, I said, ठीक है, let's go take it to the logical conclusion, go a step further, no problem, let's see where this goes. Okay, Assume for a moment at the core of it you find only a Buddhist stupa, please take it, no problem. Hindu mind will accept it because we are for the truth, very clear. Second, the weaponization of Buddhist history starts around the Ram Janmabhoomi movement by scholars like R.S. Sharma, D.N. Jha, Irfan Habib, so on and so forth, because they are hell-bent on actually stifling your claim by putting up another claim.
Yeah.
Now you'll get a concrete example and you'll be able to relate it to now. Nobody gives a damn about Hindu diversity until the Uniform Civil Code is brought about.
Yeah.
Until the conversation starts, they will say, Arey, there is so much of diversity within you. What will happen to the tribal in Assam? What will happen to the tribal in Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh? Suddenly, all sorts of people who never care about them start talking for their voices because one is used to defeat the other argument. That is exactly the strategy behind the propping up of the Buddhist argument insofar as our claims are concerned. I've said this before. They came to the court with a petition specifically saying that even Sabarimala temple is a Buddhist temple when the arguments were going on in the Supreme Court.
Tirupati also.
Tirupati, every temple for that matter. Okay, so I am saying, if you're so keen on presenting your case, why can't you stand on your own 2 feet? Why is it that you suddenly come as a plant only when the Hindu chooses to assert his claim? That is mighty convenient. Which is why the history and the politics of history is something that most people don't understand. Unfortunately, some of our own people don't understand because they constantly say, Arey, you dig deeper, you'll find something there, don't do it, nothing of that sort should be done, limit your claims to only 3. Sorry, no. If you have the confidence and you believe in history, then this can't be compromised. Now I'll come to your actual question to me. And this has been my repeated, let's say, exhortation to the Hindu community. Our arguments start, with respect to reclamation, start from politics, go to culture, at best go to society. We don't think on a metaphysical level at all. We have stopped thinking about our temples from a metaphysical perspective or an ontological perspective or a spiritual perspective. Okay. The reason why our ancestors fought so much, gave up everything, is because for them our devatas were real entities. Very real entities who are relatable in the form of a family member. So which is why the destruction of a murti would lead to literally vidva vilap, okay, where you're literally looking at what has happened. This is my community, this is my devata, I've been protecting it for so many years. Families would be dedicated for the protection of it in one way or the other in different aspects. The secularization of Hindu mind, thanks to the education that we have been, let's say, subjected to is the word that I would use, is the reason for the reduced levels of attachment to our own kshetras, where you can see a stark difference between the 1990 RJB movement to Kashi today, where I would say, other than the efforts of gems like Vishnu and his father, Mr. Harishankar Jain, honestly, it has not still got the same traction as the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. Which is why I would hope that this book sparks some movement when people read this and realize that at the end of the day, politics will do what it wants to. Institutions will do whatever they have to protect constitutional morality. Our dharmic morality, it is only for us to protect, and this cannot happen unless and until we put faith in the concept of Hindu metaphysics and we actually believe that sadhana is an important aspect of our personal lives. All this talk is useless. See, let's look at it this way. He could have written this book purely from a neutral, objective, scientific, modern perspective. That is the tourist's view of Indian culture. You come here, take a camera, मुझे ताजमहल देखना है, मुझे यहाँ पे poverty देखना है, मुझे भेड़ बकरी देखना है, I have to see the snake charmer. He could have done the very same thing. Now what is the difference, what is the X factor? He is able to relate to the invasions and he subjected himself to the torture of it. I know exactly what he means because each time you read that literature, your blood boils and you don't know how to consume it and you have no idea what it is going to do to your own psyche. It's best that people actually stay away from their families when they're actually writing such books. Because it takes a toll on you. You know for a fact that you're not going to be patient, you're not going to be normal at all. Now, am I asking the rest of the society to become like that once they read this book? Yes. 100% yes. If you do not relate to your ancestors in this fashion, you will not be able to meet the other side's commitment to its faith, person for person, man for man, woman for woman, child for child.
Absolutely.
And that is what you're looking at. So I am very clear about the fact that if the Hindu society's primary point of view and primary prism is going to be political, cultural, civilizational, which we constantly use euphemistically, and never religious or spiritual, then this is a half-baked exercise which will never be taken to its logical conclusion, because the invasions from the other side will continue. The only thing that kept us constantly alive and we rebuilt was the astha. That astha has to be revived under any circumstances.
That's very, very well said.
I just want to add to this two things. One is on the Buddhist part. The second one I'll address first. Adding to what Sai Deepak said, people may ask us, what is so important about that site? Right? We can construct it somewhere else. Hospital bana do, school bana do, this and that, which keeps coming all the time. That's only. Huh?
Apna ghar de do.
Yeah. But all through the the history of this temple particularly, and that's what I think the Shankaracharya, his idea was, Jagadguru's, when he also explained to me some of the Agama Shastras and the Marichi Samhita, Vishnu Samhita, and some of these other Vastu, documents, where it says the basic theological difference between a Hindu mandir, a Devasthanam, and it's called Devasthan, and a masjid. There's a fundamental difference where here it is a prana pratisthit murti. And as he said, it is a living entity. You are invoking the divine in the form of an idol and avahanam, and then making it a part of your family. And that's why there is nitya pujas, like you would wake up a person with suprabhatam and then naivedyas all through the day, lots of things to eat, shayan puja, put them to bed, all of that, and various, Shiva does not have, but Vishnu is alankara priya, so you have all kinds of alankarams, utsavams, and that's how the entire culture revolved around that living entity. And when you say we are going to a temple to have darshan, it is that deity's house that we are going as common people, just as I'd come to your house, abide by your rules and not impose mine in your house, and meet you, have an interview with you, so to say. But a mosque, on the other hand, is a place of congregation, which is a place of worship, but people congregate, and there is no pran pratisthit murti there. So even in Muslim countries, very routinely, mosques get translocated for mundane things like laying a railway line or widening a road, and that is possible. Whereas here, the belief among the Astikas...
They did that to the central mosques itself there in Makkah.
In Makkah, yes. So the belief here is, when you have done the avahan of the deity in that place, unless you do a vidhivat visarjan of the deity, that energy is still imbued in that place till eternity. And that's why once a Hindu temple, always a Hindu temple.
Correct.
Now, in Maharashtra, Ganesh Puja is done on the Anant Chaturdashi. You do a vidhivat visarjan of Ganeshji, and then you immerse the idol. Same with Durga Puja in Bengal. But just if you cut off the head of that deity or remove it, that place is still imbued with the divinity, with the energy, is what we believe in. And so even in this book, there is a very evocative passage from the Tristhali Setu of Narayan Bhatt, who was instrumental in getting the temple reconstructed in the 16th century with Raja Todarmal's help during Akbar's reign. And he says, he has a very nice pathos-filled advice to all the devout. He says, don't lose hope that Mahadev is not there. By virtue of the fact that once this ground had his deity, invoked there, the land is sacred. So even, and the phrase he uses is dushtam lechhadi rajas, in the evil Muslim rule of these sultans. If the deity is not there, it is broken, it is hidden, that still that place is significant, the land itself is significant. And so when nobody is watching, the soldiers are not having surveillance, you go quietly, you do your nitya karmas, you do your parikramas, you take water from the Ganga. If nobody is watching, you just put some, you can't do an elaborate Rudrabhishekam and all that, so you just put some water. If you get the chance, then put some flowers or some akshata. And that is the same template we find even in Ayodhya. If there was at Ram Vedi, where people would go and cry from the Sarayu, they would take water, go and put it there and say, this is the Ram Janmasthan. And so we believe that intergenerational memory and faith that gets transmitted. So he says, don't lose hope, but have the hope that one day Mahadev will come back. And these things, Sai Deepak mentioned how our historical facts are couched, in story form. In the, Skanda Puran, the Linga Puran, there is this wonderful story, and these were composed maybe around 13th to 15th centuries by when Mahadev's temple had gone. And so there is this, reference to Shiva being in exile. Mahadev, who can have the temerity to put him to exile from his holy city of Kashi, and there is someone called Divodasha who comes and occupies this place, and Shiva does all kinds of tricks and this and that, and he sends several, gods and goddesses, the yoginis, the 64 yoginis, all of them come to trick Divodasha to get Kashi back, but they get so enamored by Kashi that they settle down there and they form temples of them. Finally, even Ganesha fails. Then finally, Vishnu comes disguised as a Buddhist monk and then tricks so there's a subtle reference to that too. And finally, Divodasha is thrown away, and there is a grand celebration. There is a welcoming back of Mahadev into his own holy city. So there is always that hope that is given to the Astikas, that don't forget that this is that holy spot, and this is what you need to reclaim, and have that flame of hope in your heart that one day you will get it back. Now the other part that he mentioned about the Buddhist thing, there again, Sanskrit, the problem is we don't get into the nuances. In Sanskrit, one word can have 20 meanings depending on the context. If you take it at literal face value, you can go for a completely different connotation. There are some leftist historians in Ashoka University who've written a book on Shankaracharya, Adi Shankaracharya, and in that, so they say Kumarila Bhatta, the disciple of Shankara, who actually infiltrated the Buddhist monasteries, learnt all their theology, and then defeated them in Shastrarth and Vad Vivad, which is our regular, how he defeated Mandana Mishra and so on. So constantly there was a lot of contestation, but how is this in Sanskrit mentioned that there were 100 Buddhist monks and Kumarila Bhatta went and cut off all their heads, and he made powder of their skulls and blew this ashes in all the 4 directions. And this crazy leftist historians say there was a mass genocide of Buddhist monks by Kumarila Bhatta, sanctioned by Adi Shankaracharya. The poor Adi Shankara would not even have killed a fly. Now he is accused of a genocide of 100 Buddhist monks. So what does that actually mean? That means the ego. The ego which is represented by the skull, how Kali is holding it and all of that, he demolished that and blew it away. So that is an Upama Alankar. You take it at literal face value, then obviously everything is a genocide. The Durga Saptashati will also sound like a bloodbath. So I think there is especially if you have to access, I think, the history of Bharat, you will have to go to the classical languages and access them in the original with Vidwans and Vidushis who will understand that language, Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, Sen Tamil, all these languages. Otherwise, in literal lost in translation, that is what is going to happen.
Can I just add to one point to what he's saying? So the distinction between the mosque and the temple that Vikram points out is the specific subject of the discussion in Ismail Farooqi versus Union of India, which was contested in the context of Ram Janmabhoomi to identify what are the distinctions. So there, the Indian judiciary has specifically recognized this distinction, that one is a place of congregation, the other is a place of worship. What is the meaning of Prana Pratishtha, so on and so forth. What is the difference between desecration and, as he calls it, deconsecration, which is Visarjan. So the Khandit Murti is still capable of being worshipped. There is nothing that stops you. I just want to add one point. When people say that we don't have a way of memorializing our history, our rituals are actually a way of doing it.
Yes.
So when Apad Dharma kicks in, which is at the time of calamity, we actually invent rituals to actually address that situation so that that ritual keeps the memory alive. I don't know how many people practice Sandhya Vandan. If you do, you will specifically speak of the Sarpasatra sacrifice that was conducted at the end of the war later by the descendants of Abhimanyu from Parikshit, so on and so forth. And the promise given to Astika with respect to the Nagas, all of that is transmitted as part of the 32 or 40 steps which are part of the Sandhya Vandan. So you will see references to Mahabharata as part of your Sandhya Vandan. Imagine the continuity of the tradition. So this is not a bunch of people sitting together to rhyme tomes. We did that, but Khilji came and destroyed even that. So when people say, where is your history, go search for it in the ashes of Nalanda before asking this question. Go search for it in the ashes of different places. But To precisely avoid this, we had a plan B. Plan B is oral tradition. And that oral tradition means that you have, so what was done today, I think Ganapati was also done today. So you have that. Ganapati is actually, to put it in today's terms, a blockchain way of understanding your entire structure, so that you started from any, let's say any syllable or any line, you will still be able to remember the rest of it. Because conventional memory does what? If you forget a line, what do you start? Pehle se shuru karta hu. These people don't need that. They will start from the very same syllable that they forget, and they'll go from there. And that is their way of actually creating critical additions. 4 different people or 15 different people coming from different directions will sit together, and the one who's out of sync is actually wrong. That's the way of testing it. So we have had our own knowledge structures to actually keep everything alive. History has been passed on. We have become collective amnesiacs, civilizational amnesiacs, because we have consumed education which has been imposed on us to such an extent that we don't relate to the frameworks of our ancestors whatsoever, their value systems whatsoever. Therefore, we are brown Englishmen looking at Indians, or Hindus for that matter. That is one of the reasons that this entire movement for Indic knowledge systems. So he emphasizes on skill sets, on knowledge of language, so on and so forth. I just add to that point. If you don't relate to Hindu darshana, there is no way that even these skill sets can help you, because what is important is the chashma that you're wearing to look at the same set of facts. If I choose to, let's say, change the prism with which I'm looking at it, the same set of facts will lead to 2 different conclusions. Ask any lawyer, he'll tell you how that is done.
You know, Vikram, I'm glad you spoke about Narayan Bhatta, and particularly for this audience, I would like to tell you that Gaga Bhatta, who presided over Shiva Rajyabhishek, was actually Narayan Bhatt's grandson. I want you to talk a little bit about the contribution of Maharashtrians, both to the cultural resurgence of Kashi at a time when Kashi was being not having such a great time, basically, and also about the post Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj period, when every Maratha ruler tried their best to basically liberate Kashi and to build the temple there, which finally Ahilyabai Holkar did.
Yes. Just a few lines before that about the other, like in my opening remarks, I also mentioned how the whole of India contributed to its reconstruction. 1194, the most brutal acts on Kashi by Kutubuddin Aibak, 1,000 temples destroyed. Hasan Nizami mentions this and says all the wealth was laden on 18 camels and 300 elephants and taken away from there and so on. 1194. But by 1212, hardly less than 2 decades, from Bengal, you had a ruler there, the Sena ruler Vishwarupa, who comes there. It's the height of the Delhi Sultanate. So obviously he could not build back a big temple again. So he erects a stamba there, right in the heart of Kashi, and says this city belongs to Vishweshwar. I'm stamping my authority right now, that this is ours. This is 1212. So, but by 1240 CE, 1250, you had a Gujarati businessman. So Eastern India has contributed to it. Now Western India's chance. So Gujarati businessman called Seth Vastupala, who comes and gives 1 lakh rupees in those days, to rebuild this beautiful grand structure back in the same spot. And by 1270, just see the progression of how quickly, within less than a century, you had from southern India a Hoysala king, Veera Narasimha III, who donates an entire village called Hebbale so that the revenue, the proceeds that came from there could go to the pilgrims to pay the jizya tax. So by then the jizya had already come in. The pilgrims who had to go to visit our own shrines, we had to pay tax to the Sultanate. So he says all the proceeds from here are donated to the lotus feet of Mahadev. And these repeated invasions, the attacks, Aibak, then Razia Sultan, then you had the Jaunpur Nawabs of the Sharki, Razia Mosque that is there, which is considered as the original site of Vishwanath, and the Khiljis, then Sikandar Lodi, all these was going on. So Kashi, which was also the center for Sanskrit scholarship, all the scholars started moving down to southern India for, safer pastures. But at that time, in the midst of so many troubles that Kashi had, 4 Maharashtrian Brahmin families, the Shesha, Mauni, Bhatta and Dharmadikari, they migrated from this area and went to Kashi, circumventing all these challenges and staying there to create a resurrection of the knowledge systems and Sanskrit scholarship, and also create a consciousness for Kashi and its importance. So the Kashi Khanda, the Kashi Rahasya as a parishishta to the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, then the Vayu Puran had this Ananda Kanana Mahatmyam as a parishishta or appendix. All this knowledge renaissance that, after the Crusades you had the renaissance, here our renaissance was in this way. And the best part was that was translated to multiple languages. There was a Kavi, Srinatha Kavi.
Translated to Tamil, my language?
Our language rather.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I don't have a reference, but Tamil was, I think, the court language thanks to the Vijayanagar Empire. Srinatha translates Kashi Khanda to Telugu. You had Tenali Rama's son-in-law, the Rama Kavi, who again translates the Vayu Puran Parishishta to Telugu. The Guru Charitra in Maharashtra in the 15th century, that has an entire chapter on Kashi Mahatmya, what is that Panchakroshi Yatra that I mentioned, all these different parts of the yantra, what all you have to go and pay obeisance. The Guru Charitra, had that reference. And so not only in the political sphere, in the cultural, in the spiritual, in the religious sphere also, the need to reclaim it, not only physically but also intellectually, that was constantly there. And naturally, when Kashi Vishwanath Mandir was destroyed, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was alive, and it is said that he and his mother, Mata Jijabai, were so enraged, and she said, if you are man enough, the duty of your life is to reclaim Kashi Vishwanath temple. And it is said on his deathbed,
Jyotirlingas, he wanted all
all the Jyotirlingas, resurrected on his deathbed. When he was asked, you make your after journey happily, he's supposed to have said, how can I be happy when Kashi Vishwanath is still in shackles? And so that Jai. So that stream, I think, what the cultural renaissance had put in, the political masters obviously were also, inspired by that. And so the entire Maratha Samrajya was prefaced on this, that we need these sacred spaces back. And Dr. Uday Kulkarni is here, and in his books too on the Peshwas, he mentions clearly how, whether it was Bajirao Peshwa, Nana Sahib Peshwa, all of them kept making these demands, saying, negotiating first with the Mughals, then the Awadh Nawabs and the East India Company, whether it was Warren Hastings, even Cornwallis, in the third Anglo-Mysore War, when Nana Fadnavis is having a alliance with the British against Tipu Sultan. One of the clauses he says is, allow us to get Kashi, Prayag, Gaya, all these important spaces back. Of course, it is rejected. But the trial was constantly there. Many people on social media, if the Marathas were so great, why did they not take these things back? Of course, it didn't belong to them. So only through negotiations, there couldn't be a war that could be waged to get these back. They kept on trying. And Madhavrao Peshwa, who died, I think, at the age of 26, 27, in his will, there are 3 points related to Kashi. And the first part is he pledges all his descendants that this is your sacred duty to reclaim this, temple back. And Malharrao Holkar actually takes an entire army to Kashi to destroy the Gyan Vapi masjid. And then the Brahmins there, they prevail upon him and say, you will destroy and go away, but we will be, led to the wolves by these sultans. So don't do this. And so he, junks the idea. And Dr. Kulkarni mentioned to me that there was another attempt, a very unknown attempt, which in 1755, though 1669, Aurangzeb destroys this temple. But even in his own lifetime, a smaller shrine had already come up. And you have references of the Rajput kings, the Maharaja of Rewa, the Udaipur Rana, the Jaipur Maharaja, all of these people coming there in stealth, going and worshipping a small shrine. Now that shrine too was destroyed in 1755 by a local Qazi who wanted to show, I'm more committed to the faith than the Badshah. And so he destroys it, and it is said the Peshwa's guru, Narayan Dikshit Patankar, he sits on a fast unto death, saying this is sacrilege that has happened, and the Peshwa himself has to prevail upon him to give up the fast. All the shopkeepers had abandoned, all the Hindu shopkeepers went in protest in 1755. So naturally, I think Devi Ahilyabai Holkar was sagacious. She didn't take the confrontationist route.
She purchased it.
She purchased that land, and then there's so many stories that the original Jyotirling was not destroyed by Aurangzeb, that the Brahmin priests got to know it was removed and kept in the Gyan Vapi well, and then this was brought back, and so many stories. There is no documented evidence of that, but she just constructed a shikhara over it and built the current structure that you see there. The temple structure is built by her, and it was gold plated by Maharaja Ranjit Singh in 1836. The same story of how the Sikhs, who today Hindus and Sikhs are different, Khalistan and all of that.
Guru Gobind Singh sends people to actually learn the Vedas from the Kashi.
Yes, and Guru Nanak goes to Ayodhya, talks about Ram, about Durga, about Devi, and all of that. And Ranjit Singh, when he defeats Ahmad Shah Durrani around 1798, 99, he clearly makes a claim to him after the defeat that the Somnath Mandir door, that should be returned to us. Now just think about this. It was destroyed in 1025 by Mahmud Ghazni. This is 1798 or so. 800 years have passed. He's a young man in his 20s, but that memory is still there, that was our sacred spot. Even the dwar is so important that we want that dwar back.
In his will, he wills away the Kohinoor to Jagannath Mandir after having purchased it. So actually, as opposed to, let's say, state claimants, the entity that has the claim as of now is the Jagannath Mandir, because the last true owner willed it off in his will.
Yeah. So this has been the constant story of resilience, of reclamation, and this never say die. So I think that is what should instill in us that sense of hope too, not just the Vidhva Vilap about, it's actually been destroyed, because our ancestors never gave up, and so we have no right to give up, not on 1, 2, 3, on any number which we can actually produce the evidence for.
Let's move a little bit. Let's go fast forward to 1809, where one of the worst riots in Kashi happened, and where the Lat of Bhairav was destroyed, and where the Hindus of the city, they all got together regardless of whatever their denominational differences or caste differences, and fought as one. When I was reading that chapter in your book, it really boiled my blood, and it was difficult for me to even read. So I can imagine as a historian for you to actually go through all the evidence and read it and write about it without feeling that emotional connect. I don't know how you do it. How do you remain objective as a historian and write about these things that make your blood boil is something that's difficult to fathom. But could you talk a little bit about the 1809 riots, and because it's a very important chapter.
So the best part is of the British era to which we have come is now you have documentation. You have clear records in the courts. Now the Hindus never gave up on that site, constantly skirmishes, registrations in courts. But 1810 you had, 1809 was the Lat Bhairav. So just near the Vishwanath Mandir, a little distance away, there's this Kapal Mochan Tirth, where it was believed that when Brahma's fifth head was chopped off by Shiva, and he brings it there, that is the place where the Kapal Mochan, actually the skull falls off, and that's the Tirth. And just on its banks you have the a Lat, or a pillar of Bhairav, and that is the place where the Ashta Bhairavs, all of them supposed to come, and there is one pindi for each of them. Now and it is just surrounded by another mosque, and that is occupied completely by the Julaha, or the weaver community of the Muslims of Varanasi, and they were constantly making attempts to encroach this property, which is there even now. Not only the Vishwanath Mandir, there is the Bindu Madhav Mandir, which has been taken over. There are so many others, Krittivaseshwar, all of these, encroached by some other masjid. Now this particular place, it was, the place for a lot of the tantric pujas, and the Gosais, the Nath Sampradaya yogis and others. So they were not the ones who would take all this lying down. So they were constantly pushed back. And once this conflagration happened in 1809, where an entire Muslim army comes, to come and actually break Kashi Vishwanath temple. And then the Rajputs in Varanasi under Ratan Singh and several others, they form a counter army, and there is a pitched battle to defend Kashi Vishwanath, and the Muslim army is actually defeated and sent back. And the British, they are looking at all of this with horror. Like, what is happening? And they just don't know how to control this. Now, once they are defeated and gone, and the Hindus forgot about Lat Bhairav, they were giving night vigil to the Vishwanath Mandir so that the attackers don't come. So in slight of this thing, they go to the Lat Bhairav, and a cow is slaughtered there, and the blood is sprinkled everywhere, and into the Ganga, into the Kapal Mochan, and the Lat itself is broken down, and all kinds of desecration happens. And that night, apparently, and this is elaborately documented in colonial records, called the Lat Bhairo riots. For 5 days, there was carnage all over. The Hindus fought back, and there was while the Brahmins and others, they sat at the Ganga, I believe men and women, they went on fast unto death, saying the Ganga is now मैली हो गई है, दूषित हो गई है, we cannot any longer worship this. But the Rajputs took it upon themselves, and all of them go, and almost 500 mosques or something are demolished there. The Gyan Vapi masjid is actually set to fire, and the Muslims are completely evacuated from that entire space. And that time there is a very interesting observation done by the British collector called Watson, who I think gives us the prescription for today's solution to this problem. He says this is a very, very sacred spot for the Hindus, as attested in thousands of years of their scriptural evidence. This place means nothing to the Muslim community. It is just a symbol of one of the their rulers who has put something there. So my advice is we should evacuate this completely and restore this to the Hindu community. These people can build their mosque somewhere else. Now that was a very practical solution, and once it happens now in independent India, we should probably thank Mr. Watson for giving this brainwave of an idea.
Even that is not original.
But then there was a bird, one Mr. Bird, who comes there and then has his droppings, which says no, let's not do this. Let's sarva dharma samabhav, let them live together and all that. And so that space is given to. So only the mosque is of the Muslim community. This is of the Hindu community, and the compound around that is going to be for the government property. That's this thing. But both these people, right from 1857, once Awadh comes into English control after the uprising, the courts, the Awadh courts have documentations of every case, and they were fighting for the silliest of reasons. This people tree belongs to me. No, this branch that is coming into my area.
Nobody should pluck the leaves.
There's a toilet being constructed. This house is mine. All kinds of things. So it was never free from reclamation. Now the flashpoint comes in 1936, where a very important case, Deen Muhammad versus the state, is filed, where Deen Muhammad was a common Muslim who also takes the Anjuman Intizamiya Masjid, which controls the mosque, also to court, and says, now the usual this thing, you don't limit your namaz only within the mosque, you start spreading outside also, and take the entire compound. And the British were against that. They say it's creating traffic jams, it is creating a lot of problems here, law and order. So you have to restrict yourself inside that mosque only. But the Alvida namaz during the Ramzan Fridays, they all started spreading outside this. And so this Deen Muhammad and gang, they take the British government to court. So it's a non-representative suit where the Hindus were not made party to it. So the findings were also not binding on the Hindu community. But the case becomes very interesting only because it lays bare for the first time all the contours of the dispute. And you'll be shocked to see, if you read that, the same arguments are made by the Anjuman Intizamiya Masjid even today. Yeah. They tried all kinds of subterfuge to say that was not the Vishwanath temple, it was actually Dara Shikoh's Sanskrit school. No, it was actually Akbar's Dinne Ilahi, Ibadat Khana. Now all of that is rubbished by the British judge in 1937 in his judgment, and very clearly he brings out a few points which become important. One is, he notes that this is not a Waqf property, that there is no Waqif or donor. Aurangzeb may have ordered the destruction of the temple, but there is no Badshahi Farman to show in its place you build a masjid, or I will donate this land to, he is the owner of the entire land as a king, but he should donate it. That's how the Waqf thing works.
So Mutawalli would not have records for it.
Mutawalli has no records. So in the British times too, they could not produce any records. So the British judge says, this is not a Waqf property, the entire area. And interestingly, I think they didn't take it too far, but then they brought, also invoked Islamic law, and they said in the Sharia, if you encroach someone's property and do your prayers and namaz on it, it is haram, it is not Kabul. So by Islamic law also, this place is not actually a mosque, but then for the larger interest, let's give it to them. But you restrict yourself only to that mosque area.
Inside,
And Deen Mohammed takes this to the Allahabad High Court in 1942, and the Allahabad High Court also dismisses this with cost to the plaintiffs. And so till then, when you talk about religious character, places of worship and all of that, pre-independence, the religious character of this spot at least was perpetually in dispute. It was considered not to be a mosque, and there were lots of shadows about what exactly was the nature of this property.
It's interesting that the British court took just 1 year to give its nikal, but Mr. Rastogi's suit, which was filed on behalf of the deity in, I think, 1991, that took probably
We are glad that we have Sahi Deepak on the panel. If both of us are hauled and some of them for contempt of court, we know whom to fall back on to represent us.
See, the interesting point is British courts were not limited by secularism.
So, we don't have the time to go in detail for this Deen Mohammed's suite, but in his book he has recorded all the testimonies in detail. So, I think you should buy the book and read that part. And that shows, even though it was, as he says, it was a non-representational lawsuit, there were a lot of Hindus who gave testimony. There were historians also who gave testimony. And they have proved without doubt that Hindus never abandoned the place. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go in that detail. So now again we fast forward to post-independence India, and the places, the big bugaboo in the room, the Places of Worship Act, which is what is quoted by everybody on the other side every time they start to whine about something. Ki why is the court ordering ASI survey of this temple, Places of Worship Act, blah blah blah. Any ASI survey that the court orders, this is the standard argument. You know, what about the Places of Worship Act? So, first of all, I would like you to tell the audience a little bit about the Places of Worship Act. And I know he has said it's a draconian act. I agree it's a draconian act. You agree it's a draconian act. But it also has some exceptions. So I would like to tell you to tell the audience a little bit about it.
So the thing is, the mosque that he refers to, where the Bindumata Mandir actually originally existed, is the Dhaurahara Mosque. Okay. I represent the Kashi family both with respect to the Razia Mosque as well as the Bindumata Mandir. Basically, we are saying these are the original temples, so we want them back. Since it matters still sub judice, nevertheless, since the other side is constantly talking about it, so it's fair game for me to talk about it. So, see, the point is very simple. This legislation was passed in September 1991.
Yeah.
With barely 3 days of so-called debate. And the BJP, which was in opposition then, is caught by surprise by the Congress because there was no advance notice that was given to the rest of the parliament that this was going to be tabled as part of the business for the day. So there was a procedural violation, which therefore they say there's a problem with which this is being taken. I mean, there's a problem in the manner in which this is being taken up. And then there are discussions barely for about 2 days where some kind of a response comes from the BJP saying, how can you actually undertake this exercise without even speaking with all affected communities across the country, where you find out how many people are actually laying a claim to these occupied sites, so that we have a clear picture of what is the impact going to be of this legislation on existing litigation or existing claims. So it is just written roughshod into this. I think one of the columnists today, Shri Balbir Punj, he was the member of the parliament then who was vocally opposing this as part of the BJP's opposition actually. Now, my initial take for a very long time was that the legislation legally prohibits us from reclaiming our places. Around 2020, 2021, around the period that Vishnu had lodged his, or rather instituted his suit, I was terribly confused about the interpretation of two specific provisions of the Act, Section 3 and Section 4.3. As like the language is seriously problematic, it's not making sense. It's almost as if somebody has hoped that in the future somebody will notice this and pull a solution out of it, because it was done under Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao. Okay? Because He,
Bharat Ratna.
100%, because the man, apart from being a hardcore sadhaka, so to speak, was said to be in prayers when the disputed structure was being brought down.
Yes.
Okay, so he was doing a homa according to some people. Two, surely he wouldn't have come out with a legislation to bar. So it was in, so the public perception of the person and the legislation were at conflict with each other. So in typically what happens is when you're trying to reconstruct itihasa, the traditional approach is this. You know the general traits of Sri Ram. Okay, you know what he is bound to do, what he is not bound to do. Okay, if somebody provides you a certain instance which is going against every grain of what he stands for, you will immediately question the veracity of that interpretation, because you are allowed to fill in those gaps in a manner which is consistent with his overall character, not otherwise.
Okay.
So applying the same logic, if Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao was a proponent of this, how did he actually allow this? Now what happens is section 4.3 or section 4, there are two sections, I'm so sorry, the critical sections are 3, 4 and 5. 5 says that the Places of Worship Act shall not apply to the Ram Janambhoomi dispute.
Yeah.
Okay, that takes you to another line of the argument, I'll come to that later. Which means no bar or no prohibition which is captured in this legislation shall affect the claim of the rival parties which are in litigation before the Allahabad High Court. That's point number 1. Now what 3 says is that the religious denominational character of a particular place of worship as it existed on 15th of August 1947 shall not change. Now here's how a lawyer will look at it. Religious character is different from religious denominational character, because denomination is a subset, religion is a superset. Okay? Therefore, if you say the denominational character shall not change, you're only saying Shaivite hai, Vaishnavite nahi banega, Vaishnavite hai, Shaivite nahi banega, baat khatam. That's where it stands.
Shia Sunni.
Correct, Shia Sunni. So therefore, the point is, does section 3 apply to conversion from religion to religion as opposed to denomination to denomination is one question.
Okay.
Second is 4 says, dekho bhai, there will be so 3 is the bar, 4 is the status quo, which is jo waisa hai वैसे का वैसा रहेगा. 4.3 then goes on to say, if this happens to be a heritage structure or an archaeological structure, then the bar under all of the above provisions under section 4 under this section shall not apply.
Does not apply, yeah.
Therefore, if you are able to establish that this is an archaeological structure which is defined under section 2 of the Archaeological Act of 1958, where it speaks of the Monuments Act and the remains also, archaeological remains, there are 2 separate definitions. One for archaeological monument and one for the remains. Both of them say, 100 saal se purana hai, to ye archaeological ho gaya. So the lawyer in Sri P.V. Narasimha Rao decided that all our temples must be 100% over and above 100 years. Okay? Therefore he says, हिंदुओं थोड़ा दिमाग लगा लो, कभी तो चाणक्य नीति का उपयोग कर लो. So please, I am giving you a gift from the past. Whenever you guys wake up, all you have to do is to undertake an ASI survey, establish that this is beyond 100 years. POW Act is not necessary, it is irrelevant to the conversation. Why is this crucial? Why is this crucial? I am proceeding on the basis, तुम act को रखो या उठाओ, मुझे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है. I have to be ready for plan B, which is to say the presence of the act, if it is held constitutional, shall not come in the way of my reclamation thanks to the express provisions of the act itself.
Okay.
That's point number 1. 2, if you choose to interpret it in a way that defeats my claim, that is when I have to say, now I will challenge this on grounds of unconstitutionality. तब तक मैं क्यों कहूँ that this stands in my way? रोड़ा है ही नहीं, आप क्यों बोले कि रोड़ा है, why are you going on saying this? You don't have to say this. I only have to say, this is the express language. We will apply all principles of constitutional morality. Okay? Tell me how does this come in my way in terms of reclamation under the legislation. That's it. Okay? The moment you do this, you'll realize that the reference to the Archaeological Act is not actually a coincidence. There is a Venice Charter of 1964 that deals with how archaeological places are supposed to be maintained. You have government regulations. There's a national policy that was released, I think in 2015 or 2021, where we have come out with detailed policies of that. So, what is the meaning of a heritage site? What is the meaning of an archaeological structure is understood in law. It does not need to be interpreted again. Therefore, all we have to say is that ASI, and therefore there is no bar under the law. Which is why the other side constantly says, you first decide this question on the Places of Worship Act before you actually proceed with the ASI survey, because ASI survey ho gaya, to doodh ka doodh aur pani ka pani ho jayega.
But
They sought to defeat this excavation even in Allahabad High Court, by the way. There's a detailed judgment that the Allahabad High Court had to pronounce when there was such an opposition to the excavation. Because they said, mandir tha hi nahi. Then they said, agar hota bhi to humne nahi giraya. So they said, okay, why do we get into this nonsense? Let's just dig and find out. Then there was resistance, because then archaeological evidence would establish that there are pillars with Vimanas, with the Amalakas, with the Garuda and everything that relates to Vishnu temple motif. Sorry, you were asking something.
yeah, so I was saying even in 2022 when AIM went to Supreme Court, I think Justice Chandrachud said that ASI survey, I mean there is no problem in trying to find out what existed before, and so ASI
See,
survey
the simple
is okay.
principle that you follow in these issues is, the first forum which is supposed to take a decision on such an important issue, which is relevant to a suit proceeding, is the court of first instance, namely the district court. Because here writ petition nahi hai, it is a property dispute. So therefore it is for the Kashi court to actually decide. From there you have a problem, where will you go? The appellate court. From there you have a problem, you go to the Supreme Court. You're actually rushing to the Supreme Court to say, take away the power of the local court to decide what is first meant to do. Remember, under the law, the Supreme Court may be the Supreme Court. However, in matters where the district court has primary authority, even the Supreme Court cannot interfere until a decision is rendered by the district court. Therefore, according to me, for once, constitutional morality has worked in our favor.
So now
I think what he said is so pertinent, because fabricated history can keep going on, and its death knell is archaeology.
Until archaeology comes into the picture.
Correct. And that
After
is why
that, there is a mic
archaeology-
drop moment.
so now we
Talking
come
of
to the
fabricated history, I must mention, I've mentioned it in several forums, but it is important. It's a very rochak, manohar kahani, which, my grouse about my...
Shefali ji, this program will not go according to your timelines. After this, I will take one more shot. Go on.
No, I have no problem. I can sit
I
here.
hope they don't have a problem.
This is Pune, they will stay.
So, talking of fabricated history, just one instance, and that I think sets the template as to how history was fabricated, with specific reference to Kashi Vishwanath Mandir. Now there is, and this is quoted even now, interestingly on social media, in television channels, as to why Aurangzeb destroyed. First of all, you deny that he didn't destroy, but then there is another thing. So this was spun in a nice fairy tale by this gentleman called Dr. Bishambar Nath Pandey, who was a Congress member, a great scholar of his times. He was also the governor of Odisha and several other, one Sahitya Academy, Padma Puraskar, all of that. And he writes in a paper called Islamic Culture in India or something, where he details a story. And it's a fascinating fairy tale. So it says, Aurangzeb was going on an entourage to Bengal. As I'm telling that, I'll also bust some of the logical gaps in that story. So first of all, if you see all the documented biographies of Aurangzeb, he never went to Bengal himself. He only sent his commanders on expeditions. But in this story, he goes on this expedition. Now, along with him, there are all the Hindu Rajput Rajas and Ranis also going along with him. Now, this entourage then goes via Varanasi to reach Bengal. From Agra it is going. And they stop there, and all the Hindu Rajas go to him and say, oh, Jahanpana, this is such a, most sacred spot for us. Can we stay back tonight and worship Vishwanath? And being the generous, golden-hearted, secular emperor that Alamgir was, he said, okay, chalo, hum kooch kar lete hain yahan pe, ruk jate hain raat ke liye. And they all stay back. The second loophole, the same Rajas who put the petition to go and worship, they don't go themselves. They send their wives. And the third loophole is all the Ranis go unarmed, without any security guards, Rajput, Ranis. So all these Ranis go, they take a dip in the Ganga, then go there and then worship Vishwanath and come back, and a head count is conducted. One Rani is missing. Now everybody search for her, she is not to be found. The Rani of Kutch. God knows who this Rani actually is in reality, because there's no date to this whole story, by the way. It happened sometime in the history of mankind. So, and then when Aurangzeb's, people go, soldiers go to look, it's a typical 1950 Bollywood Hindi cinema scene, you know, there is a sliding door of Kashi Vishwanath temple. There is a Ganpati Murti, the soldiers shift it and the door just slides apparently. And then there is a flight of stairs to the Tehkhana, which is right below the Garbhagriha of Vishwanath, and there they find this unfortunate Rani wailing and howling, and she has no clothes and all her ornaments are taken away.
Is there a Brahmin villain in this?
Yeah, I'm coming there. So then they ask her the reason, and she says rightly that, oh, you know, I was molested and raped by all the evil Brahmin priests of Kashi Vishwanath.
Typical Salim Javed story.
So she says that, and they do this routinely. You know, the Brahmins here are so crooked that any wealthy pilgrim comes, they molest them and take away their wealth. So all the Rajas are so enraged, their wives are enraged, they go and put pressure on Aurangzeb saying this is a place of Satan, so just break this thing down. Aurangzeb did not want to do it, but they just force him, chalo kar lo, please hamare liye kar lo. So it was on Hindu pressure that poor secular Aurangzeb went and destroyed the Vishwanath Mandir, and I think my very dear friend Audrey Trushki also, I think, subscribes to these stories in her hagiography. And we don't know which Rani was found in Mathura temple which he broke, or Somnath that he broke, or there are other stories there. Now when you go to the source, like any good historian, you go immediately to the source. To this Bishambar Pandey's story, if you trace back the source, it goes to Pattabi Sitaramaiah, who was the Congress president.
He wrote the history of Congress.
History of the Congress party, whom Gandhi ji favored, and so on. And he writes in this some feathers and stone or some such book. Just see the subterfuge, underscoring that. He says, I was told this by a friend that there is a certain mullah in Lucknow who has a very rare manuscript in his possession which talks about this story. Now my friend told that this mullah will bring me that manuscript, but before that my friend died, and so I could not get that manuscript from that mullah. But this is the larger, consensus about why Kashi Vishwanath Mandir was destroyed. So, unnamed mullah, unknown manuscript, unknown friend are all sources. But the same people will say Masire Alamgiri, which was written during Aurangzeb's time, 2 years after his death, and it was commissioned to Sakid Mustaid Khan by Aurangzeb, giving all his court papers saying, you chronicle my rule. That is, suspect. But this particular story, Pattabi Sitaramaiah writes in the 1930s, and in fact the great historian from Pune, Gajabhav Mehendale, I think he and Sanjay Dikshit ji told me this, that Mehendale Sahab was told by N.C. Gore or somebody who heard from, we can also do this, I hear, you hear.
So he was the librarian of Bori.
Yeah.
N.C. Gore was the librarian of Bori.
Yes. Yeah. So he was told himself, Goreji was told by Sitaramaiah that I actually एक कपोल कल्पित कहानी था which I created to create Hindu-Muslim syncretism.
Correct.
So you just see the kind of venomous manner in which history has been used and historians have been employed, and once all you have to do is plant one falsehood, then there is circular referencing mafia which comes into play. I quote him, then he quotes you, then you quote her, and then we all peer review journals each other, and then it becomes the fact
it's
of
a citation
one lie can travel so many times
Before
that
the truth is the time to try it
shoelace, yes. So that is, and there are in this, also quote Marxist historians who take this up, and in their word salad and academics of history, they put some more layers as to why this temple, as told by Sitaramaiah and Bishambar Pandey, Gargi Chakravarti, K. and Panikar, I have named all of them, that this is the subterfuge these people have done. And they say there was a Sufi rebellion, and again the Pandits collaborated with the Sufi rebels, and so to punish the Pandits, they destroyed the Kashi Vishwanath temple. That is the Marxist interpretation of that. Now there too, there were a couple of Sufi rebels who went and hid in a mosque. There Aurangzeb went and pulled that fellow out and got him killed. But he didn't go and destroy the mosque. But in this case, it's not as if the temple belonged to the Pandits. Even if they collaborated and rebelled, it was not their property that he could have caught them and hanged them, which he would have done very happily. There was no reason for him to destroy. So everywhere, cover fire for the basic tenet of that theology, which talks for destruction of another viewpoint, and couch it in so much. And Mr. Gore's testimony will be clear that it was done clearly on the advice of so and so to create this Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb animal which we have never heard of much.
Thing is, in law, this would be not just one degree of hearsay, multiple degrees of hearsay. But here's the thing, and this is crucial. This is not the first time this trope is being used in the context of the destruction of a temple. When they speak of destruction of Somnath by Ghazni, they say he was invited by the people there to actually relieve them of the torture of the Brahmins. This is a professional historian saying about the repeated ransacking of Somnath.
There is a new version to that now,
Which is?
A much improvised version. I think social media historians with eyeshadows and all of that. So apparently pre-Arabic, pre-Islamic Arabia, there were lots of deities. So there was this thing called Sumanat or something there.
I see. So that has become Somnath here.
So Muhammad Ghazni thought that maybe that Sumanat has traveled all the way to Somnath and therefore to destroy the Sumanat of Arabia, he came and destroyed. But I don't know, he also destroyed Mathura. So what Krishna was which pre-Arabic name?
It's Mat and Ahura from Ahura Mazda, understand? So, see, here's the point. Just think of this for a moment. Remember this, and there's a reason I dropped the Brahmin line. And I'm in Pune, so I might as well say it. The point is this. The Brahmin is typically presented as the villain in Marxist historiography across the board to justify all sorts of horrendous crimes against the Hindu community and to justify conversions. That's been their strategy. I just missed out on the section 5 angle. I'll just explain that that's very crucial.
Yeah.
So, section 5 says that the Places of Worship Act is not applicable to Ram Janambhoomi dispute. So, which means when the judgment is being delivered in the context of Ram Janambhoomi, you shouldn't expect any discussion on the Places of Worship Act at all.
Yeah.
Because it is irrelevant to it.
True.
I think 10 paragraphs from paragraph 85 onwards speaks of why Places of Worship Act is a crucial piece of legislation to protect secularism of the Indian Constitution. In a judgment relating to a dispute to which the legislation does not apply, why did somebody feel the need to discuss and defend the Places of Worship Act? Because the idea was, एक मंदिर दे रहे हैं, बाकी के दरवाजे बंद कर रहे हैं, अब चुप बैठो. That is the message that was being sent.
Yeah.
Fortunately, again, constitutional morality protects me because the law says, if an issue is irrelevant to the dispute at hand, any discussion by the court on that issue is not legally binding.
Okay.
Which means we get to say, this was obiter dicta, which means it is extraneous observation that is not relevant to the central dispute at hand. Therefore, even if it is delivered by 5 judges of this court as part of the Ram Janambhoomi verdict, it shall not come in the way of the challenge to the Places of Worship Act. The other argument being, if the challenge needs to be even, let's say, mounted in the first place.
Okay.
Okay. So look at how historians say something. Then there is cover fire provided through, let's say, through verdicts, which basically says that this is how we will defend the legislation, so that this doesn't pave the way for future litigation on these aspects.
So
Please understand this.
Which brings me to the next question, and I think we all 3 of us at least are agreed on this, that there should be no cap on only this much and no further.
Correct.
Yes.
But my question to you is that I believe that every temple which has been turned into a mosque or a church needs to be reclaimed. But the point is, there is no one figure that right now can be quoted and said that this is the figure. So one is, how do we come to that survey? How
Right.
do we decide?
Right.
Secondly, how do we decide the order of priority, and how do we go about it? My
There's
question
a
is
very
more about
simple way
the
for it.
modality of it.
There are
and this
3
This is a
ways.
question for both of you.
There are 3 ways, and I think I've discussed this before. The first thing is, one of the first things that the government should have done before it promulgated this legislation was to undertake a law commission report to find out how many places are contested places, how many claims are outstanding. That was never done. Okay. Therefore, the period from 91 to now should be discounted as part of this entire process, because we have to say, ever since you put this law in place, people have abandoned their claims, or at least they have not been allowed to present it.
Okay.
So prior to 91, how many such outstanding disputes were pending? First question. Second, when Ram Janambhoomi was being contested, nobody asked, "Kaun iski ladai ladega?" People formed their own groups, and then others joined the entire movement. That is how this should happen, which is to say, if it is my Kul Devta place, we will fight. There are people who will do it. So those communities which have a direct relationship with that particular temple will take it up, just like you have akhadas which did it for Ram Janmabhoomi, you'll have others do this. That's 2. 3, the simpler way forward is the constitution of a truth and repatriation tribunal, wherein you basically say, the government says, enough is enough where this matter is unnecessarily contested in different courts of law, God knows when this will resolve. You want to strike a balance between the right of reclamation and preservation of public order, correct? That's your simple funda? Okay, great. Then constitute a committee which will basically look at the evidence presented with support of the ASI, institutional support of the ASI, and the only option from there has to be to the Supreme Court. It's a 2-step process. That's it. Finish this in a step-by-step fashion, create a separate team altogether. Now people might say, "Arey, yahan pe itne sare cases already pade hain, then why should we actually constitute another thing?" Look, if you feel the need to protect a corrupt politician from, let's say, from conviction, you are capable of constituting fast-track courts, which never fast-track themselves. Yeah. Okay? So I am saying this is something that has been festering for generations together. You have tried to put this to bed, it has not worked. You might as well give it an institutional resolution once and for all. 2, how does this, let's say, how does the losing party benefit from this? Well, the Supreme Court has showed the way, Mr. Watson has shown the way. The other thing is, I am also making the point, Arey bhai, how could the concept of a waqf come into existence unless and until it was based on conquered land? The fact that you have so much of land, actually the bulk of it is those lands which belong to the temple. Because it's not just the temple that was occupied, but all the related lands. So the common aspect of both Kashi and Ayodhya is that when the waqf records were looked at for the purposes of Babri, they would find that there was a handwritten interpolation with respect to the waqf being created in the context of Ayodhya. Arey, ye kaise ho gaya? How is this suddenly handwritten? And this comes at a later point of time. Because there are periods until when there is no such record in the waqf record whatsoever. The Mutawalli, who is supposed to be the record keeper, has no such record. Out of the blue it comes about after the litigation has started. Once the litigation started, actual manuscripts authored in Arabic and Persian went missing in multiple seminaries across the country. Because whitewashing happens in 2 layers. Arabic or Farsi to Urdu, Urdu to English is the second level of whitewashing. Yeah. Okay? By which time, once it reaches English, the process of secularization is complete. So this is exactly how evidence has been tampered across the board. So I would say this tribunal must have the right of access to institutions across the board so that nothing goes missing. It is possible for this to happen because you have to realize ultimately this issue falls within the exclusive domain of the government of India, which is the union government. If they choose to come out with a solution, all this litigation can be put to bed in one stroke.
Okay. Vikram, your opinion on the same issue?
It's a law, so I will stick to whatever Sai Deepak has said because I'm not the expert there. But I think as a historian, the responsibility of historians and scholars of the Hindu Samaj at large would be to create this list also as to, even if you're going to take it to court, especially if you're going to take it to court, you will need a lot of evidence. If it is an out-of-court settlement, which is unlikely, but a very ideal situation, then it is okay, goodwill, this and that and all that. But if you're going to go to court, you have to marshal a lot of evidence. And we saw that in Ayodhya, that our evidentiary value was so high, and same in this case too. I think Vishnu and his father, they plan to give copies of this book to all the judges, so that this is actually, proof with all sources cited. So that hard work, I think Hindu Samaj needs to do. We are usually lazy on that front. Slogans and this thing is a nice thing, but then someone who gets to the field, dirties your hand, and even if you have to go to another side and say, give us our sites back, the other side will ask, how many? Batao kitne hai? Kitne aadmi the? So then you have to say, I have. So Sitaramji has done the initial work of some 1,826 or something, and he says it's a tip of the iceberg. So, but then it could be anything. It could be 20,000, 40,000. It could be 4 lakh. It could be anything. Because as I said, Hasan Nizami in his account says in that one invasion in 1194, 1,000 temples were destroyed. So in 800, 900 years of Islamic rule, saying 40,000 is not a big deal. It could be much more than that. But then Hasan Nizami also says 1,000, but he doesn't say which are the 1,000, what are the names, where are they located. So that hard work we need to do, which we generally don't. We are given to a lot of rhetoric, we are given to a lot of excitement. Quietly, I think this should be done and we shouldn't even be discussing it openly either in platforms or in media, etc. Quietly, groups should sit together, and that is a strategic way of doing it, a Savarkarite strategy of how to actually get what you want, and then have this list ready so that the minute this commission or so on, if at all it gets formed, we have hope in the future, we have this document ready saying this is what we want and these are the things to reclaim.
Fair enough. Which brings me to my last question before I open the floor to the audience, which is, again, going into your last point, we're talking about the future. And I agree that Hindu society as a whole needs to do a lot more work in documenting, in doing the historical field research. We have said and expressed enough angst about the lies that have been told to us by Marxist historians. Now, that is done and dusted. What is the way forward? The only way to counter it is by writing books like you have written or Sai has written, which are meticulously researched and which break down the propaganda. So how do we encourage younger scholars to get into this field and not just write emotional WhatsApp messages or emotional Facebook posts, but do well-documented, meticulously researched books?
Correct. That's an excellent question, Shefali, and I think I always emphasize on this that the only alternative to distorted history is alternative scholarship, and we have to invest in that. It is a lot of hard work. Those of us who do this research, we know that it is not an easy task to dirty your hands, to face the backlash. That is another thing, that's okay. Correct. But just the task is so laborious. So in that, a small step that at least I have taken is this Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, thank you, which does exactly what you said, foster new scholarship in Indian history. And I'm not disparaging the social media battles or screenshots and all that. That has its own place, to counter on a real-time basis and so on. But social media is very ephemeral. Tomorrow, YouTube may shut down, or Twitter became X may be banned or something. Then all your evidence will just go down. And in non-left circles, our best pastime is to have one panel or session on Marxist distortion of Indian history, and then have this voodoo doll, and then keep putting pins to Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, D.N. Jha, this, that. But we just don't realize that time has passed.
Yeah.
I mean, Arun Shourie, in Eminent Historians, he has already documented all this 30 years ago, 25 years ago, where he has debunked them. And they have debunked themselves in the Ayodhya, case, where even someone like Irfan Habib, the kind of lies that on that Vishnu Hari inscription that fell from the structure, Meenakshi Jainji's book talks in detail how the kind of testimonies they gave in court. It's a saga in itself. It's more colorful than Bishambarji's fairy tale. They say we got all our evidence from Times of India articles, whereas the VHP is giving you documents and documents of Puranic and Persian literature and all of that. We were asked by somebody. It's fascinating. So that ship has passed where we keep on criticizing. I think the time for action has come now, where you can say, let's remove Romila Thapar's books on ancient India. But what do you substitute it with? Even to this day, we have not had a alternative ancient India history or medieval Indian history and so on. Even now, universities have those as the textbooks for UPSC preparation. These are the textbooks. So unless somebody does this back-end work to give this new knowledge, and jnanam paramam balam, there is nothing more supreme than knowledge. This, just talking about it will not help. So in the foundation, two things that we plan to do. One is, of course, give out fellowships to aspiring scholars, young scholars across India, with the idea that for 1 year you'll be given a substantial amount of money to foster that research. And the ask is, at the end of it, you should come out with a publish-worthy manuscript, which will be published. So every year, if 5, 6, 7 books come out, just imagine in 10 years, there'll be an entire supply chain of about 100 new books that will come. And these books can then go and replace all those other toxic, literature which has already existed. The other is, the foundation also hopes to take on proactive research on certain historical themes which are of importance contemporarily, and we are planning to seed that in educational universities, institutions. So a pilot project which we're going to start maybe from June or so is on the rise and fall of Buddhism in India, which is I think very important to know, because so that every time we start claiming this, someone doesn't say a stupa is sitting somewhere under something. So, but for that too, and we are seeding it very, thinkingly in Nalanda University, which better place to have that. But importantly, like I mentioned earlier, the knowledge of the classical languages is important in this. Otherwise, it's just regurgitating what is already existing. So a Sanskrit scholar, a Prakrit, Pali scholar, an archaeologist, a geologist, and a modern historian, we plan to sit together. It's an experiment. We have not tried it earlier. We'll see how it goes. We'll sit together, try to arrive, go to the primary source, see what the primary source says, and based on that, draw conclusions. That could be journal articles, it could be books, it could be whatever. But one needs to start that churn somewhere to only then, I think, one can ensure that over a period of time. Otherwise, till then we can also keep blaming the government. They have, and in 10 years we haven't had any change to the history textbooks, which is very, very sad. We've had HRD ministers who say not a word has been changed, as if it's a matter of pride. It should be a matter of shame. But let it be. Let us not keep on being negative, talking, government has other priorities. Let us at least produce this parallelly, and once it is produced, maybe it's easy for them to say, "Acha, chalo, isko add kar do in the syllabus, make that the part of the UPSC training or something." So that hard work, that research, I think what Savarkar did in 1907, 06-07, when he went to London, sat in the British Library, used those records to write that seminal book on 1857, calling it the first war of Indian independence. We need more Savarkars today who can actually use that history for our civilizational battles. We have never given importance to history, unfortunately, and all our civilizational battles, other than law, the only other problematic area, and even the legal cases are based on historical problems. Correct. So unless we put our history stable in order, which the other side has very assiduously done, because they know that is the core essence of identity, of civilization, everything. So you manipulate that, the game is over. But we have not done that. And even our Sanskrit Pandits and others, they've never used their Sanskrit knowledge for historical research. Only on Vyakarana Shastra, which is all great. I mean, in its own place, it's great. But why not use that knowledge also for historical research? All our history lies in those texts. And if you're using English translations, you are limiting your worldview to just 200, 250 years for a 5,000-year civilization, 6,000-year-old civilization. It's a very narrow pinhole to see that whole scenery with. So I think this is one small attempt. I really don't know how it will work, and especially in Pune, especially in a city which actually, you have the Bhandarkar Institute, you've had the Nationalist School of Historiography coming from your city.
Correct.
When James Mill came up with his diatribe against Indian history, it was scholars from this city who wrote anonymous letters saying the first Hindu, the second Hindu, to debunk everything that he said. And in some way that laid the foundations for this so-called Nationalist School of Historiography, Rajwade, Bhandarkar, all these people. So I think in Pune, and with your help, scholarly, monetary, so many multiple ways of help, or just patronage and encouragement, and then dissemination of that information through social media channels and all of that, Pune Samvad, these platforms, I think that is the only way forward if we have to win this battle from a very, scholastic and a bauddhic, kind of a direction.
To all the young budding historians in this hall, there is a book in Pune waiting to happen, waiting for Purneshwar, if any of you are willing to take up the challenge.
And when you write all these books and get into problems with leftist historians, please befriend one lawyer, always, because it will help you file defamation suits, all kinds of allegations will come on you. So if anyone here wants to become a historian, also start cultivating, I think, a very thick hide, no sensitive nature, correct. Nothing, because every weapon will be unleashed against you to bring you down.
Sai is on all of our speed dials for the same reason. Shall I open the floor to questions? I just have one request. Just ask a question, please, and stick to the point, because so that more people can be accommodated.
In the interest of time, we really have to do just 2 questions because the speakers have been so generous with their talk. And first, let's give them a big round of applause once again. It really felt like we are a part of a conversation in Shefali's drawing room, and it was as fluid and as conversational as it could get. So thank you, all 3 of you, for such a wonderful evening for the audience.
One question from this side, one question from that side.
From the left
Yes,
and right.
democratic.
Can I go ahead with the question?
Yes, please.
Yes, first of all, grateful to be here and being these interesting times. I'm Rohit from Pune. So like it was spoken that there are 40,000 or more temples who need such attention across the country. So do we need to have a think tank, like you people are there, a strategic group who will guide the temples across the country? It could be in very remote places also. So how do we go ahead? Like for example, Puneshwar.
See, one of the things that I have tried to say, or at least share with organizations which operate in different societies or different cities, is that if you want to occupy the same space as other organizations, you're constantly hoping to reinvent the wheel. The one space which actually does not have too much of competition and where there is a dearth of talent is actually research, as he rightly said. Perhaps the only point that I would add is that the state can play 2 roles. One is, it is its job to incentivize something that a private interest will not. So the state's job is to be a loss-making machine by default, in fact, where there is no return of direct investment that is actually expected. So that can happen. 2, considering that there is a huge audience which is consuming this entire work, clearly the atmospherics are ready, the audience is ready to consume this through textbooks. So when the society puts together the repository of knowledge, the megaphone or the state shall create the multiplier effect by putting it through textbooks. Now what I would suggest is, when there are research, let's say organizations, which put together the material and the rest of the society starts building pressure on the state saying, why are you still not mainstreaming this after years of being in power? What is your excuse today? Because today you can't say that there is no repository, there is no scholarship, there is no primary scholarship. All of that is done and dusted, at least in some areas. So I would believe that thinking elite groups of each city should take it upon themselves to actually show the way in terms of cultural leadership. Allow me to say this, even if it sounds elitist or classist. Even in the realm of culture, the Pareto principle works, which is 20 people actually lead and do the work, the rest of the 80 people typically follow. Okay? The idea, therefore, according to me, is not to convert an entire city. I always look for strategic intervention in those parts of the society which can, let's say, create an example for others to follow. See, let's look at it this way. If everybody could be a Savarkar, we wouldn't have a problem, right? The point is, what do you do for those who are not built in the Savarkar mold in terms of spine, but have effectively the scholarship that is needed? Because aptitude has to meet spine in these areas. You cannot survive this battleground without actually having spine. According to me, 60% is subject matter knowledge, 40% is patience to withstand the nonsense that comes your way. And the patience to sit through absolute mediocrity when they keep on saying the same thing over and over again. Okay?
Maafinama likha.
Absolutely, maafinama likh diya. That's how they keep writing. So what I'm trying to say is, to address this, perhaps the city's financial elite, the money bag, so to speak, I would request them, please go back to the original contributions of the Vaishya community, where it was their entire job to come out with endowments to support scholars. Okay? Temples where the path from which this would be funneled previously, I go back to my pet topic, but independent of that, until that happens, I think it falls upon the city's intelligence here to identify this and start incentivizing this. Otherwise, it remains a storm in a teacup, where it is fantastic for us to discuss this in these sessions, but it has to go beyond the air-conditioned atmosphere and it has to reach the masses, which means primary scholarship can be in English. From there, where does it go? It has to come out in local languages. What is the point of it otherwise? Right? It has to reach the masses, because ultimately the voting masses, their minds are the tools of weaponization in the hands of these historians. Don't think that Marxist historians operate only in the English speaking circles. Hindi, everywhere these guys are there. So what is written in textbooks by them is ultimately converted into pamphlets, which goes to places like Bastar. Remember that. So you have to be able to look at catering to different segments of the population, but it starts from core primary research-based hardcore scholarship. That is the way to start it. So if this has to happen, I would only request those who have been abundantly blessed with Lakshmi to support Saraswati.
Last question, please.
Someone from this side, I'm so sorry.
No, also the
Acha,
left.
please, yeah, you can ask, and then one question from this side. Sir, you can ask.
I think your mic isn't working. Sir.
According to British records, say Shivaji's Sardar told British, his master goal is to free Kashi, Mathura, and Ayodhya. Number one. Number two, you talk about researchers Savarkar. Other part of Savarkar, active part of Savarkar, Babarao Savarkar offered 1 lakh rupees to destroy Kashi Vishwanath Mosque.
Can you come to the question, sir? Because I think people are.
Question is that how about if you get a more than 400 seat, you can amend the Constitution of 1991 law.
I agree. I agree. But this question should be directed at someone else. I agree. I've been saying this. Most of our litigations are unnecessary. The government can do a lot. I agree with you. There is no quarrel there. Last question, I think.
Yeah, hello.
A request to the volunteer, only one question, last one, please,
On
on
this
this
side, one
side.
question.
Ask
Yeah.
the lady. Yeah.
My question
Let's
is
give it
to,
her,
Yeah,
please,
Please give it to the lady.
Give it to her, yeah.
33%.
Exactly 33.
No discrimination, both sides are represented,
The
so.
3 people asked, 1 person's a girl. So, yeah. Yes, ma'am, please. Sorry, it's a Vampati
Hello?
conspiracy.
Am I audible? Yeah. So I'm really grateful here to hear you all. So my question is, you have both the authors that you have mentioned so many barbaric incidents in the book. So I just wanted to know your thought process, how you bring yourself back after reading everything, how you come back to the point, how do you come back to the reality? Just wanted to know your thought process so that we can also imbibe that in us.
I wish there was an easy answer to that. It leaves you terribly disturbed. I must say, as Sai Deepak mentioned, those 6 months of research and writing, I think my dark circles went outside the spectacles because lack of sleep. Even in my dreams, I was seeing some Shivalinga, some dilapidated structures. It really takes a toll. It's not easy to do that. I think in my case, what has worked is a very deep spiritual anchorage. Spiritual practices which works for me. I've nobody to prescribe the same thing to everyone, but I think a historian or anybody chronicling history is called upon to become a moral eunuch, which is very difficult after so much of immersion in that particular subject. Obviously it riles you up, but while you are committing it to print, you are asked to take a distance and emotionally state facts as it is. And so there I think the larger message of what Kalhana had said about history itself, itihasa, the very word itihasa, it thus happened. So let it be a dry catalogue of events and facts, but the other aspect of itihasa, dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesha samanvitam kathayuktam puravrittam itihasata chakshmate. The kathayuktam, in a very story format, Puravrittam, the narratives of the past, told to you in a story format, in the achievement of the 4 Purusharthas of Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. But importantly, it should also have a didactic element to it, an Upadesha Samanvitam, moral fabric, right, wrong, all of that. Itihasa Tachakshmate, that is called history, which it in turn is it thus happened. So I think that needs to be a larger, template. There has to be storytelling, there has to be an adherence to facts, and there has to be a societal message also. And our ancestors have given a very clear, self-assured message as to what the utility of history writing is. Is it just for the heck of writing something, or is there a larger message, a social charter also for this chronicling? I think that becomes important if you're going to, and that's the best I try to adhere to, so that my own angst, my biases, which are dying to come out. So there is this introduction page where I let loose. It takes about 10-15 pages where all the bile, all the thing is vomited out. But then in the rest of the book, it is just as if, you know, you're sitting from the outside and looking at Kashi's temples being broken to smithereens, the Shivalinga being pounded and put on the steps of masjids and all of that, which is the sad responsibility that is put on a historian's shoulder.
Fortunately, I am not a historian, so I don't need to play the game of neutrality. The only thing is, I still fall back on facts only from a strategic perspective to deprive the other side of an argument. I look at it from a litigator's perspective. Two, when I wrote the second book, the final chapter of it was on the Mopla riots. I have a picture for every chapter, so the picture for that is the Mopla sword, the Mopla knife in fact, because I wanted this to be a stark reminder to people of Kerala and everybody else as to what is it that has happened to their ancestors in the past, barely a century ago. I finished it at 2 a.m. on 20th of June 2022, and by the time I was done with it, I broke down. But the one thing that I've learned to do with time is never allow this anger to dissipate. Never ever allow it to dissipate. And never let it become omnipotent ventilation, or rather, I'm so sorry, impotent ventilation. Let it become omnipotent ventilation. Because the point is, you need to know how to use, there is no better weapon than anger according to me, provided you know how to channel it exactly. It can be just, let's say a tube light, or it can be a beam of laser. So how you choose to channel it and how you choose to summon it at will when you need to make an impact, that I think is the trick, apart from, of course, spiritual mooring. So one of the things that you're expected is, of course, there's a thick skin, 100% yes. But remember one thing, what you're seeing or what you're going through is not even a fraction of what people have already seen.
Absolutely.
And you have the benefit of telling their stories and yours today. Be grateful, count your blessings, but you have to be a part Kshatriya when you actually get into this for you to undertake this activity. There is no other option. I would only tell people one thing. In a narrative war, every forum, every medium has its job. It has its own place. But the strongest weapon always is your ability to marshal facts, your ability to articulate, which comes with a lot of hard work. So every pain or every ounce of pain that I take from history, I sow it back with respect to the next book, saying, now I'll come back with a vengeance, I will give it back to you with interest, you wait and watch. Okay? That is exactly how I operate. It has worked for me. Now whether it will take a toll on me, that's for time to say.
Okay, ma'am, the second question from this side, this can be the last one, it would be fair. So Sai, it's the question to you actually. We have around more than 50 laws which are anti-Hindu. So it includes Waqf Board Act, or it can be the Place of Worship Act. Can we have a account from you, or maybe a book in making from you which we can refer and understand how the governments in past have made it the way it is today, the anti-Hindu?
I have to finish the third book this year. The fourth book ends next year. With that, the series is complete. After that, I'll take a break from writing for a while, simply because I am not an author. I don't want the tag ever to be used for me, simply because it has to be used for people like Vikram, who actually do this full time. As a litigator, my battlefield is different. These books are meant to support and strengthen the battles of court. That has been my strategic investment as far as book writing is concerned. Okay? Otherwise, I wouldn't have undertaken this task. The second object, of course, was to shut up people who said, "Tumhare taraf se intellectual scholarship kahan se hai, ye kahan hai?" I said, "Okay, to baith ja bhai, I'll do it. You wait." So, other than that, I have no interest in constantly doing this. I believe in weaponizable knowledge because we are no more in the realm of pure academic scholarship. Everything has become political, everything is a battleground. So I will take up only stuff which I know for a fact can be used on the other side, period. So with that, I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to be the villain here. I'm sorry, sir. We have to close.
This is regarding the
volunteers.
Sour
I'm
movie.
going to request to
This
take
is
the
regarding
mic
the
after
Sour
this
movie.
question.
You to respect the moderator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you
Watch
very
the
much.
Savarkar movie.
and it has been a wonderful audience as well. So a big round of applause for all you people who have spent your Friday evening. Literally, there was pin and drop silence while
Meghaji, just
the speakers.
two,
yes.
three people I just wanted to thank.
Yes.
One is, of course, Manoj. Manoj is back here. He and his entire team, I think they've been so passionately involved in putting this together. It's not been an easy task for them. So extremely thankful to them and my friend Pushkar Lele, who's there. Dr. Pushkar is an amazing Hindustani vocalist and someone who also helped immensely in putting this evening together, along with, of course, all of you. Thank you so much for coming here to share my joy on this very, very significant occasion.
Thank you. And there is, as you all know, the book, the sale of the book is going outside, and there's also going to be a signing by the author. I'm going to request all of you to do this very peacefully and in a very disciplined manner. I request the volunteers to be a little hard in doing this. With this, I sign off, and I'm going to invite Mr. Manohar Dapkara for a quick and official vote of thanks. I hope you have a good evening, a peaceful and a happy weekend, and I hope Dr. Sampath's book will keep you reading. Thank you.
सभी 2 मिनट के लिए बैठ जाएंगे. जय श्री राम. हर 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 हर. आज के कार्यक्रम के लिए मुख्यतः मंच पर व्यासपीठ पर विराजमान श्री साईं दीपक जी, श्री विक्रम जी, श्री शेफाली जी, तीनों ने हमें जो समय दिया, ये सभी एक इनका बिजी शेड्यूल है, बिजी लाइफ है, और जिस स्पष्टता, विचारों की स्पष्टता से उन्होंने विचार रखे, ये सब चीज़ें हम सभी को इनसे हमारे लिए अनुकरणीय है. जैसा विक्रम जी और साईं दीपक जी ने कहा, हमें ज्ञान का भी अर्जन करना है और बल का भी करना है, और सोकाल जो सेक्युलरिज्म है उसका चोला उखाड़ फेंकना है. जिस क्लैरिटी से आप लोग बोल रहे हैं, हमें उसी क्लैरिटी से समाज में जाके इस बात को रखना है. यही टेक अवे हम यहाँ से लेंगे. पुस्तक को पढ़ेंगे भी, 50 लोगों को ये स्टोरी सुनाएंगे भी. तो इसी के साथ हम जाएंगे. साथ में मैं आज आभारी हूँ आप सभी का, साथ में पुलिस प्रशासन जिन्होंने हमारा कार्यक्रम में परवानगी दी, पुणे महानगर पालिका, ऑडियंस जो आप सभी 4 बजे से बैठे हैं. मैं देख रहा था यहाँ कई लोग 4 बजे से आकर बैठे हैं, कहीं बाहर सांगली कोल्हापुर से आए हैं, उन सभी का अभिवादन. प्रबोधन मंच, पुणे संवाद, प्रभा खेतान फाउंडेशन से एहसास वुमन ऑफ पुणे, प्रभा फाउंडेशन, श्री सुजाता जी सबनीस वो भी यहाँ हैं, उनका भी अभिवादन. और सभी कार्यकर्ता जिन्होंने इस कार्यक्रम में सहयोग किया, राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ के भी कई कार्यकर्ता इसमें बैकग्राउंड में इन्वॉल्व हैं, जिन्होंने व्यवस्था का सब जिम्मेदारी देखी है, उन सभी का भी बहुत बहुत अभिवादन. भविष्य में हम ऐसे जन जागरण के कार्यक्रम करते रहेंगे. मैं तो श्री विक्रम जी से आग्रह करूंगा, क्योंकि एक नारा चला था एक समय में, कोटि कोटि हिंदू जन का हम ज्वार उठाकर मानेंगे, सौगंध राम की खाते हैं, हम मंदिर वहीं बनाएंगे. इस बार हम सौगंध महादेव की खाते हैं, हम मंदिर वहीं बनाएंगे. और इसके लिए हमें अब 30 साल या 500 साल नहीं रुकना है, आने वाले 1-2 साल में ही कर रहना है. तो हमें ज्ञान से भी तैयार रहना, और जरूरत पड़ी तो शक्ति से भी तैयार रहना है. अयोध्या केवल ज्ञान से नहीं बना, शक्ति भी लगी थी, हमें याद होना चाहिए. नहीं तो सुप्रीम कोर्ट में 30 साल और फैसला नहीं होता. तो इस सब का हम संज्ञान लेंगे, वैसे यहाँ से टेक अवे लेके जाएंगे. सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
वंदे मातरम सुजलाम सुफलाम मलयज शीतलाम सस्य श्यामलाम मातरम वंदे मातरम शुभ्रज्योत्स्नां पुलकितयामिनीं पुल्यकुसुमितद्रुमदलशोभिनीं सुहासिनीं सुमधुरभाषिणीं सुखदां वरदां मातरं वंदे मातरम वंदे मातरम. जय.